We're going to go ahead and start. I'd just like to report we were in closed session through lunch, and I'm reporting out no action taken. And we can move on to item number...
Excuse me, Chair. I'd like the record to indicate that I was not present during that closed session.
Okay. So Debbie Ponte was not in the closed session.
Can we have the
rest of us
subject
were.
matter of closed session?
Sure. Closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1, conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation. Two cases, Dennis Ponte versus County of Calaveras at Calaveras County Superior Court, case number 12CV38597. County of Calaveras versus Ross Thornton, and El Dorado Superior Court, case number SC201-50086, and County Council Board action. So no action taken.
Thank you, sir.
No problem. Okay. Regular agenda, number 6. Nope. Number 9. Number 9 is Health and Human Services Agency are going to receive a presentation and conduct a study session to provide direction to staff in the effort to determine the type of emergency shelter that will best serve Calaveras County.
Good morning, Supervisors. Rick Sawicki, Director of Calaveras Health and Human Services. Today we are asking you for a study session as well as your guidance in determining the type of emergency shelter that would best suit Calaveras County, which you heard from this morning, and certainly through all of the meetings that you've had to date since September 9th. The Butte fire has produced the largest group of homeless and displaced population in Calaveras County's recent history. Calaveras County is part of a continuum of care that is a regional group that works on the issue of homelessness and rapid rehousing for those who have been displaced due to fire, natural disaster causes, unemployment, medical issues, including physical and mental disabilities, incarceration, and substance abuse. There is a homeless count coming up for Calaveras County on January 27th to capture the information to assist the continuum of care in applying for funds for recovery and long-term solutions for our population, as well as the other counties that are in the continuum. We are asking consideration of a permanent emergency shelter to be considered in your deliberations. Residents would know where it is. One of the things that we've heard an awful lot, and in particular Supervisor Edson, I'm sure, and Supervisor Wright heard this a great deal as well as Supervisor Ponte. People kept saying over and over again, you know, where should we go? Where should we go? Where should we go during the fire? That issue still occurs even when there isn't a fire, because people want to know about when somebody gets displaced, where are they? That was the first question out of almost every State Department's mouth that I got during the fire when they started making calls on a daily basis to us. It also could be used for the issue of warming and cooling issues that we've had where there's been rain, cold weather, etc. Not having those on one location on a permanent basis has really continued to prove to be an issue. We are presently utilizing and probably overstaying by quite a few years now our neighbors, Amador and Tuolumne, who we use some of their shelters. There's problems and issues with that. It takes not only the Health and Human Service staff out of the county to transport people when they have a need like that, but it also does the same for law enforcement. And you all know that there's very few deputies available at any one given time on the streets. The other thing is we haven't even taken into consideration the strain on our fellow counties that are our neighbors. And, you know, they need to also, they have created these shelters for their own residents, They've been very gracious, but as their population grows, there's less vacancies for, shall we say, Calaveras County residents. We presently do have one shelter. It's a domestic violence shelter that's run by the Resource Connection. It serves primarily women and children, and they do a fantastic job. But as you know, that's not the majority of the population either when you look at it holistically. So we're looking for your direction because we really would like a stable location that we could use for year-round for the kinds of issues that I just talked about. Now, last week, the County Assistant Administrator, Brian Moss, and I attended a meeting with FEMA, and it was all with the state departments. And the main emphasis of this was to look at, long after when FEMA's gone, which is 1 year from the date of the fire, for them to help both Lake County and Calaveras County with all the various state departments in our recovery, because it will go way beyond the September 9th, 2016 date. One of the things that we did hear during this meeting was that Calaveras and Lake would receive priority from the Home and Community Development State Department for funding for CDBG this year. This would allow us the opportunity, if you so desire, to include in, for the first time, some funding for a shelter in the amount of $900,000. Because every government entity can actually apply for up to $2 million. So, and that, it's not in your write-up because it came just last week, and I just want to let you know. Right now, I'd like to introduce the chair of our Continuum of Care, Beetle Barber, and she has been the chair and probably one of the mainstays in the Continuum who could give you some of the history as well as some current information. Beetle?
Thank you. I'm Beetle Barber. I work for the Amador-Tuolumne Community Action Agency, and I have been associated with the Central Sierra Continuum of Care for a good long time. I appreciate very much that you would invite me here today to begin this discussion. This is not the first invitation that I have received from Calaveras County. We were invited to come over here, the Community Action Agency, in 2001 by what was then called the Human Resources Council, Executive Director Len Reed, to talk about whether Calaveras County wanted to open an emergency shelter. So we seem to be coming full circle. The Human Resources Council invited us back in 2003 because they had a great idea to form a regional group that would do planning and collect data around homelessness. And we have been meeting ever since. The third Tuesday of every month, we meet in your Sequoia conference room for an hour and a half to 2 hours. It is a very well-attended group. At any given Tuesday, we have 30 to 40 people in the room. Amador, Calaveras, and Tuolumne counties are all represented, and about a year ago, Mariposa County elected to join us. The important thing about a continuum of care is that you do receive guidance from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and let me tell you, that's a double-edged sword. HUD giveth and HUD taketh away. But what they emphasize is that anything like this is a local planning process. And so they invited us, Calaveras invited us to join in that local planning process. And I want to assure you that we are in no way here to give you any kind of advice today because it is a local planning process. It's a local decision. Having said that, I want to talk specifically about the way we do our emergency shelter. The way you do an emergency shelter will be entirely up to you. We gave you the financials on running the emergency shelter for a year, and so what I have brought today, which I failed to put in your packet, but I'll pass around, is the numbers of people who stayed at the emergency shelter during that same time period. One of the things that we learned from HUD and from working together is to quantify the problem, to figure out exactly how many people are homeless at any given time. And that's why we do the annual point-in-time count. That will start tomorrow at noon. It runs for 24 hours until noon on Thursday as well. We try to get to as many locations where we believe homeless will be gathered as we possibly can. That will be a challenge this year in Calaveras County. And so we have enlisted the help of a number of volunteers, including the people in our continuum of care, including social services, behavioral health, probation department, behavioral health. We want to bring as many people to the table and have them go out and count so we have some idea. We don't rely on just that one-year count. Throughout the year, we do what is known as a homeless assessment report, and we count a Wednesday night in April, in June, in September, and in December to come up with a balanced idea. And if you take a look at the handout that I just gave you, I'm sorry, I don't have one for everyone in the room, you will see that during that year, from the fiscal year of July 1st of 2014 through June the 30th of 2015, we served 123 people in our emergency shelter in Jackson in Amador County. 95 adults and 28 children. If you look at the bottom of this report, the average and median length of participation in days, you can see in the last column that median length is about 38 days. There's some HUD stuff on here that I don't think you really want me to waste your time explaining. They divide people into leavers and stayers, and it kind of messes with the statistics. But the median length is 38 days. If we look at our bottom line, how much it cost us to run that shelter, it's about $120,000 to run it for a full year. It is all fully funded. We have a donations account that usually runs about $10,000 a year, but the entire rest of it is done through federal and state funding. With 123 people there, and all of them staying 38, which obviously they don't, but let's just take a median there, that's about 4,674 bed nights. And if you divide that into the bottom line, it costs us about $25 a night to have somebody stay at our shelter. Nowhere else will you find a price that's that low. It is really true. I mean, even if you talk to your jail commander, it's very expensive to keep people incarcerated. We are offering an alternative to incarceration, and we are offering many, many support services to go along with that. So a couple other things I just wanted to bring to your attention. I want to assure you that Calaveras County does have services for homeless. As a part of our continuum, you have a rental assistance program called Rapid Rehousing, which is specifically for people who are literally homeless to get them back into housing again. That is run by the Resource Connection. You also have a CalWorks housing support program, again, for families with children who are literally homeless. So you are doing things for homeless as we speak. You have ongoing programs. What you're considering today is to whether to enhance that with having an emergency shelter. I can give you many good reasons why our emergency shelters are important to the communities that we're serving right now. We sent you one letter from our chief of police in Sonora, which we're particularly proud of because law enforcement we really need their support to keep our shelters going. And he was happy to write that letter. I don't know if it made it into your packets or not, but we have a copy of it for you. And in Amador County, the probation department provided a letter of support for our shelter there. They are not at all the agencies who receive support and give support to our shelters. Again, it's probation department, but behavioral health, child welfare services. Child welfare services they collaborate with our shelters frequently to stabilize a family so that the family can move towards a family reunification plan. And the court systems, drug dependency court, all those kinds of programs that are intended to help a family, a household, an individual move forward, they benefit from that one place in Tuolumne County and that one place in Amador County where they can find their clients, where they can continue to work with their clients. So a couple of other things I wanted to say. I've been doing this since January the 3rd of 2000. And in the time I have been basically running shelters that are funded through government support, government financial support, I have seen a number of nonprofits and faith-based groups attempt to do this. And I am sorry to say, I think that this may be a place that government has an important role to play. I see nonprofits give up. I see faith-based groups give up. We had one give up just last week in Tuolumne County. They have the best feeling for it, the greatest amount of compassion, and they really know what they want to do. And it is very, very difficult. It's very difficult to keep that service going without the influence and support of government. And the last thing, I told Mary that I would talk a little bit about money, because I know that's very important. The State Department of Housing and Community Development, like HUD, giveth and taketh away. However, we have been, over the years, very successful in applying for, they used to call it a Federal Emergency Shelter Grant. It's now called an Emergency Solutions Grant. Part of that is for rapid rehousing, and part of that is sort of the nuts and bolts of running our shelter, our operations costs. I have no doubt that we will continue to apply for that money and that they will provide. We have great capacity, and we've been doing this for years, so they trust us. We've also, as Mary was talking about, the Community Development Block Grant, we've been able to sort of turn around the intent of their funding and get them to focus on homelessness as an issue across the state of California. And so, as we go forward, we feel assured that our shelters will remain solvent and will be able to keep providing the services that we are. I'd like to offer that assurance to you also. I'm here for any questions. Our former shelter coordinator, Denise Cloward, is in the audience today, and I asked her if she would speak a little bit about what an average day is like in our shelter. I do want to tell you that we don't have a sampler on the wall that says "Home Sweet Home." It says, "Don't get comfortable." A shelter is basically like an emergency room. It is a triage that you use to help people keep moving forward.
On that note, I do thank you for the information and your work. I do have a quick question on do you have numbers, and maybe you've already supplied them on people going from the homeless shelter to having homes?
I didn't bring it with me, and I do have it. One of the most important things that we got from the Central Sierra Continuum of Care is a homeless management information system, and the report that you have there is actually 21 pages long, and I would be happy to email that to you.
Yeah, that's what I'm really curious about.
Right.
Because I think that most of us would agree that, we don't want people in homeless shelters,
Right.
That's just like kind of a last-ditch effort to help people. We want to get them, help them get themselves back into homes.
Exactly. It is not a solution.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, are there good numbers on that, good data on that, or is it hard to collect, or?
Better numbers on rehousing than on finding employment. That has started to turn around a little bit. It was turning around, it's turned around pretty good in Tuolumne County, not as good in Amador County, and there is no shelter here, so we can't really judge how many people have been able to find employment. Yes, people do find housing, and I feel that I'd really rather show you the hard data than just anecdotal.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question too.
Oh, sorry.
Just in general, so one of the things I find is sometimes with the funding, it's very narrow scope, like it only can be used for this kind of purpose. So what you're describing today, is this a purpose of, like emergency? There's a power outage and this is shelter where people can go to, a cooling center, a warming center, lost their house due to fire. I mean, is this kind of a catch-all kind of emergency shelter housing, so there's no real strings attached about it's only used for warming?
That's a model that you can choose, and they do exist. I go to workshops on the state level all the time, and there are a number of jurisdictions who only do a cold weather shelter only do a hot weather shelter or just extreme weather. I think that's an opportunity that is likely to come your way. You probably know that Tuolumne County was recently awarded the National Disaster Resiliency through that competition, and that's one of the things they put in, and I put that in your packet as well. You can think big.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Denise Cloward. I do work for the Amador-Tuolumne Community Action Agency. I had the pleasure of, about 4 years ago, starting at ADCA and being the emergency shelter coordinator for about 4 years. So I was responsible for the on-site facility maintenance, the structure, and direct case management and services for all the folks that were coming in and out of the shelter. A day in the life of the shelter. If you would picture in downtown, it's aesthetically correct. It's quite beautiful in Jackson and also in Tuolumne if you'd like to visit. A house full of about 20. Alarm goes off at 6:30 or 6:45. There are men, women, and children, and the dormitories are separated according to family units and for privacy, of course. The children that have school that morning have showered and used the bathroom facilities the night before, and the folks that have a job get to shower first. The chores are already divvied up on a list, and so the residents are maintaining the property, and of course our agency is receiving in-kind for those services. So maybe a congregation is going to bring by the breakfast for that day. There are churches in Amador County that do that for our shelter in Jackson, or somebody has on the chore list for that day to prepare the meal. So people are eating congruently together, and the kids are off to school, they've had a good meal, and they're not missing school. Maybe by 10 o'clock, public health stops by because there's a pregnant mom there or some younger children that need to be enrolled in the early Head Start program. So the public health nurse will stop by and work with that mom and those children. The coordinator is working very effectively with so many different services besides Health and Human Services and First Five. University of Cooperative Extension might be doing nutrition component classes on site. We have smart money, financial education, and budgeting counseling classes. These things are happening on a very consistent basis, and the residents are responsible to attend if they are not working. So they're out between 10 and 2, and it's like a fine-tuned machine just constantly moving, if you will, and the property is maintained, and we get a lot of single guys that have excellent skills and they want to give back. So maybe they're going to paint outside or they're going to redo something on the structure, and so that's amazing, and they love to give back. So the community supports it. Law enforcement obviously supports it. The public services are always coming by on site. I don't like to use the word deserve because that usually sometimes in people's minds takes out the client's responsibility to do something, but people do need a place to sleep and eat and get ready to start another day. We can't expect families and individuals to move on to their next step of mental health or health and wellness without their basic needs met. And everybody in this room understands that. And there's about 50 reasons I could give why people become homeless, and cancer and divorce and disasters, mental health, financial poverty. There's just so many reasons, and I know emergency shelter doesn't solve it. I wouldn't stand here and dedicate some time to deliver it if I didn't work the front lines and understand it now. I also live in Calaveras County, and I understand that it's missing in our county. I see it every day. And we are serving residents of Calaveras County, and we can show those numbers in both our shelters, as Beetle mentioned. And I always say this, it might sound a little cheesy, but I think that our county is as strong as our weakest link, and this is a weak link in our county, and we have to meet the basic needs of our most vulnerable citizens, and I think that shelter will provide that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is that it for your presentation?
Hi, my name's Kathy Hull, and I'm the program manager for Calaveras Health and Human Services. And I just, this morning, ran an ad hoc report to see how many homeless we have on our rolls. Right now, we have about over 9,000 cases, and out of those cases,
How many
we
was
have-
that? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
we have over 9,000 cases of Medi-Cal, CalFresh, CalWorks.
Oh, okay.
Out of those cases, we have 364 that are homeless, that on their physical address, they have homeless. That is people that, some people are couch surfing, staying with friends, some are on the street. It's a combination of different situations, but I just wanted to give out some actual figures to you of what we have there. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Mary?
So, as you heard from Denise, one of the issues is the ability in Amador and Tuolumne for their staff and all the service providers to work with people on an ongoing daily basis. We don't have that luxury because if somebody is in the other county, not only is there the transporting, but then there's transporting to the shelter at night, but there's also the back and forth kind of issues. We lose time, we lose valuable worker time, not only in health and human services, as I said, but also with law enforcement, probation, you name it, the whole array of human service providers in our county. And it continues to be an issue, especially now more than ever, strain. To me, and this is just me as the director, the issue is we have the opportunity now to receive some funding to resolve an issue and to look long range at resolving the issue of having a shelter or having some type of housing for people in those emergency situations. It is not just the Butte Fire, but the Butte Fire does bring us up to the ability to apply for funding over other counties. That's pretty rare if you've ever been involved in any state meetings. I mean, Calaveras is not ever mentioned in hardly anything. The larger communities have a tendency, because they have greater numbers, to receive funding. This year we have that opportunity to actually be at the top of the list. And I'm sincerely hoping that you will consider that as a good possibility of resolving a long-term issue. And then if you have any questions, if not, I presume the public, there are members of the continuum here also of care, as well as many of our community service providers who we work with on a daily basis.
Any questions, guys? No? I'd like to hear some public comments. I'd like to hear public comments.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, public comments.
I want to thank the ladies for what help they had given to us. I really appreciate it. But not to be too mushy and nice about it, I believe you were and I was assured that we were ready any and all emergencies a few months back. 6, 7, 8 months ago, we had a discussion over here. And obviously we were not in many different phases, and hopefully we, as a Board of Supervisors, will eventually take a look at it, what it would take to be ready for an unthinkable. What you folks' imagination, you will have no problem with it. But I'd also like to bring it to your attention for shelters, the needy. Do you folks know how many buildings, facilities the taxpayers own and what they use for? Have you ever thought about it? I mean, it's nice election thing to, hey, you can have this house, this structure, and have a clubhouse there. That's great, okay? Those folks will give you the votes. And basically, it's next to nothing, okay? Let's get real, okay? I'm sure it's for a good cause. But is there any reason you could not say, hey, you can have this deal for a good cause and so on, but if the manure hits the fan, this is going to be turned into an emergency shelter instead of having people laying out in the dirt and on plastic in the middle of the night. You know who was ready to take care of things? Yes. The neighbors. They would have helped. They would respond to the emergency right then and there. And I don't care if it was faith-based organization or just neighbors in different county, that night, that day, they were up here. And putting it bluntly, folks, it wasn't your administration who was out there, in my neighborhood anyway. They were not there. From Modesto to Contra Costa County, people came up right then and there. And you know who else helped? And shame on you, the people that you totally ignored as thanking. I mean, firefighters, the local firefighters who were out there that day, that hour, in a couple of minutes to help the neighbors. 30 seconds. They were not recognized as yet. The CHP, the sheriff department, the neighbors, I believe sooner or later, folks, they need to be thanked and recognized. They just did it, not because there were jobs, because they cared, and it really showed what great people we have in this county. They were there and helped give shelter and help the first responders, folks, and someplace along the line. All the chest beating I've been hearing for the past couple of months, righteously or not, this body failed to recognize and give them the proper kudos that they deserve. And also I want you to realize that the taxpayers, the property taxpayers, local money, and it not just includes you, did you ever had an account for how many buildings, shelters, the property taxpayers own in this county? Did you ever were aware of it? How many structures sitting empty from different, let's say, countywide organizations that you pay?
Okay, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can give you a hint, but I don't want to get political.
Right.
Hi, I'm Debbie Calco with the American Red Cross. Listening to Continuum of Care, I was part of the Continuum of Care in Stanislaus County and helping with that with the CDBG grants and things like that. As me personally knowing, doing Red Cross and the shelters that we opened after the Butte fire, moving it from one location to the next at the last minute, we saw what that caused. It was not, everybody was able to get notified to be able to come in. So having a set location that is one that's going to be there for your homeless count, which is here, they're not going anywhere, is really something I really beg that you consider doing, looking into. And the Continuum of Care is a fantastic group who've done a lot of research. I've been part of, like I say, in Stanislaus, where we actually would go out at 4 o'clock in the morning with breakfast to do the counts, to find those folks. So they have good data, and we've done the experience of seeing what happened after the Butte fire and trying to get folks in to which location. It's, okay, we're going to do it in Mountain Ranch today, we may be doing it in Railroad Flat tomorrow, but are we going to be able to outreach to all those folks who may need it, to where if you have a set location, this at least gives them an opportunity to, I know where it is, I can go there.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Excuse me. Peter Maurer, Planning Director. Just wanted to point out in the housing element, which we just updated and adopted last May, there is an implementation measure that discusses the funding for emergency shelters. The county shall pursue funding for emergency shelter programs to be developed through interjurisdictional cooperation. This is exactly what we're talking about. The need for emergency housing for shelters existed prior to the Butte fire, has been exacerbated by it, and I would fully support whatever we can do to at least address this one implementation measure. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
Public comments or?
Public comments?
Good afternoon, I'm Tanya Dowson from Valley Springs, and I just wanted to bring to your attention that some of the funding that's being sought after for This program is coming from HUD, is one of the potential grants they'll be seeking. And there's a new thing going on at the federal level with HUD grants that affirmatively furthering fair housing. It's called AFFH. Is now a legal requirement that federal agencies and federal grantees further the purpose of the Fair Housing Act. Communities that accept HUD grants will now have local planning overseen by the Department of Housing and Urban Development through the AFFH. Our local planning authority could be undermined by the federal enforcement of sustainable development smart growth cities. The AFFH requires agencies and communities that apply for HUD grants to detail income level, religion, color, race, familial status, disability, and national origin of every single person living in every neighborhood of the community. They will then determine the imbalances and, if necessary, force a massive shift of people into such neighborhoods to achieve the desired balance. Under AFFH, once a town takes HUD money, it effectively loses control not only over its housing, but schools, zoning, transportation, the environment, and business location. We could get a glimpse of what happened, of what's to come, by taking a look at Dubuque, Iowa. Dubuque instituted its own low-income housing point system, granted preference to Dubuque residents, county residents, state residents, and out-of-state residents in that order. Although HUD's rules supposedly allow localities to craft their own housing priorities, Dubuque's point system was deemed unacceptable by HUD. HUD was able to declare Dubuque's low-income housing point system discriminatory, since the vast majority of Section 8 applicants from Chicago were African Americans. Dubuque's preference for citizens of its own city and state were deemed racist. The feds undertook a review of Dubuque's housing policy that effectively treated the city as part of Greater Chicago. HUD insisted that Dubuque would have to admit housing applicants in conformity with the demographics of the larger HUD-defined region. Having previously accepted HUD funding through the Housing Choice Voucher Section 8 program, as well as HUD's Community Development Block Grant System program, Dubuque was formally obligated to affirmatively further fair housing in whatever way HUD defined that obligation. Refusal to submit to HUD's dictates would have led to the withdrawal of federal funding or a lawsuit for supposed discrimination or both. So please do not accept HUD grants. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Al Segala, Taxpayer Association. I'd like to piggyback on Tanya's comments. And what's particularly alarming about this AFFH regulations is that the silence about this. The federal government has taken over the land use planning process of local governments if you accept their money. That should be front page news. And of all people, the planning director should be informing you of this. The planning director should be sensitive to those things that the federal government does that affects your powers as a county, especially in land use control, land use designations. This is serious stuff. We'd recommend, in the interest of the taxpayers, that you instruct all government departments to be sensitive of anything coming from the federal government that will deprive you of your powers as Board of Supervisors and as a county. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Okay, any board comments?
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
Is it okay if I speak again?
You're the presenter.
I forgot to say this. In our shelters and also in our point in time count, we always ask if people are from that county, and year after year after year, way up in the 90% of the people that stay at our shelters are actually from that county, or they're from Calaveras County, and we do get a few. I think we had 50 in the past year that were from Calaveras County, kind of evenly divided between each of ours. But when we do the point-in-time count, because we're trying to find out, are these native sons, or are they, coming here from Modesto or Stockton? And it appears that they're not. We're still up in the 90s as far as that is concerned. And the point they brought up about affirmatively furthering for housing, fair housing, they just couldn't make that harder to say. Our demographics at our shelters and our demographics during our point in time match the county's demographics. The only thing that we have found is an overmatch, sometimes Native Americans, and that really depends on if we have volunteers from the rancherias who come to participate in our point in time, because they'll get a higher count. But that's what affirmatively furthering fair housing is. It's making sure that your demographics for any particular service match the demographics of your county, and we're successful with that without trying all that hard.
All right, thank you. Any other public comments? Board?
I have a question, Mr. Chair, for the young lady making the presentation. On your funding, how much are you relying on HUD funds?
On HUD?
Yes, ma'am.
HUD is the great-granddaddy of all funding for homeless and housing. They just are. I mean, they're in a million places. It's, you're probably look at your county funding and you would find HUD in places that would really surprise you. In our case, they are all homeless funding. We don't get very much money from HUD directly. Actually, our continuum of care does, because we went after their planning process, and we're bringing in all 4 of our counties together, about $400,000 a year for homeless services and housing. However, our shelters get money, it's known as federal pass-through. There's a state agency, the State Department of Housing and Community Development. They have a division called the Financial Assistance Division, and they have a subdivision of that called Homeless Services. That is HUD money, but it comes through the state.
And are you required, with those funds you're receiving through your feed down, are you required to participate in the point-in-time homeless census, the PIT program?
We are required, however, we would do it anyway. We did it in 2004 just because we believe that if you want to address a problem, you really should quantify it first. And so long before we received any money from HUD to do a point-in-time count, we did it anyway.
And that's a program that you have to participate every other year, I understand, from our documentation?
Yes, we do. We started out just doing the odd years. So when you look in your packet and you see 09, 11, 13, 15, we're doing it this year, which is an even year because of the Butte fire, because we feel like it's a really important year to find out, to make sure that we have our data correct.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions by the board? No? All right.
What do you need from us?
Yeah, what do we need? What do you need?
So we're here today to ask the board to give us direction on the issue of what type of shelter would be appropriate for Calaveras County, given everything that you've heard. We will be doing the point in time on the 27th, and we'll have more information at that point too. But the main issue right now is to begin to get some direction, because if we were to look at applying for the $900,000, we have a lot of work to do in a very short amount of time, because we will be applying for funding for the upcoming cycle, which is in a few months.
That's through CBG?
It would be the Community Development Block Grant.
Right.
Yes.
So,
that's-
so let me give you a little bit of my insight on this. So One of the things that I noticed through this disaster is that we were short on housing tremendously, and still are. Obviously, there's a bunch of houses missing from our county now. But when we were evacuating people, thank God for the folks that were taking people in, and for people like the Calaveras County Realtors Association of Realtors, and folks that were working with them, because Kathy Topol was helping. Your groups were right there with them. Everybody's working really hard together to find every single vacant piece of property that we had, and it still wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. And so I know people that are still in the valley. I know people that are still living with friends. I know people that are hopping from one couch to another. And folks love helping people, but it kind of gets a little bit hard after a while. And so I see the need for some kind of shelter situation, or something to be able to put us in a better position in a situation like this. I know that over the years, me being a business owner here, I have had numerous homeless people come in there. More lately in the past, before the fire, but more lately in the past 2 or 3 years. And so they'll roam around town, sleep under staircases, out in the park. They come in, they use facilities, private business facilities for bathroom and cleaning up and things like that. I think it's just a fact that we have to deal with. And so, but this fire, man, brought it out. And so, I'm not an expert on what we would need, but I can tell you we need something, because because it's a real situation. Now, I know people are afraid of inviting folks into the area because we have such great services. And quite frankly, where I see that most is if you have like a church or somebody like that they have free dinners or something like that. You'll see you'll see an influx from that. And sometimes it creates a negative effect, and sometimes it doesn't. It has in cases, and you go up and talk to the folks, and they'll straighten it out. But reality is folks are looking for a place to go to be able to find something, some kind of help. If a person is homeless and they've also been affected by this fire, then we need to find a comfort zone where they were, at least, to get them back to that comfortable area in which they're willing to live. And if they want to move further on, great, we can maybe help them do that. It would be their choice, though, I got to tell you, because we don't force them to do anything. I guess you figured that one out, right?
I have no delusions on that one.
Yeah, you can't do that. So, and you can spend a lot of money and time trying to. But yeah, I see the need for this. I would love to work our way out of the situation by creating more jobs up here and more services or more things that we could do to help people out of that situation. I see this also as a potential for that, because where else, what's going to happen if you don't? And I can tell you what's happening right now, because we don't. So I see it all the time. I come out in the morning, go to my restaurant, and there's a young man, 26 years old, sitting there squatted up against the wall with no shoes on, and just sitting there waiting for a ride to the next place. So I feel there's a need. I don't know what the extent of it is. In this fire, I believe that I don't think we could build something that big, but I'm in favor of trying to go through the process to figure out what we need.
You know, I support that. I believe there is a need. I was surprised to hear Kathy's number because I didn't think it was that high. But I do think there's a need for that emergency shelter. That can be the warming center, the cooling center, the emergency shelter. And so I'm all for, you know, if it's a committee, a task force of sorts to help put this together with funding, I think that would be beneficial. I think the hardest part is going to find out where we put it in Calaveras County. You know, we know people don't want to travel too far from their home base. So I think that will perhaps be the biggest challenge that we face. But I definitely think that we need something like this. And I know that when we have our cold streaks and our hot streaks, you know, people are looking for places to go. And, you know, we don't really have anything unless it's quite emergent, like Debbie said, through Red Cross and something temporary gets set up. We certainly saw that through the Butte fire, but I think we need something on an ongoing basis. So I'd be happy to help if it's a task force or whatever gets developed to pursue this funding.
I'd be interested in seeing the more results from the other two counties and you know, what it costs and what kind of positive, what kind of progress they have with the folks that come there and, you know, where they go and what they do after that. So it'd be really, really neat to see that kind of data.
I agree that it's needed also. I chime in with everything, so I won't repeat what they've said, but this is not the first time I've heard that HUD grants come with a lot of strings attached. And I would encourage, for one thing, any grant that's accepted, the board has to do that, correct?
That's correct.
But the other thing is, I would encourage you to look for ways to get that support outside of HUD. Or at least, if it's going to be a federal grant, that it comes through a vehicle where we're not beholden to them. Because I have heard that they can take over your operation or force things onto you that we may not want to prescribe to. So please look for as many ways outside of that as you can, would be my request.
Okay.
I would concur with Supervisor Kearney. I do share some concerns about HUD funding. I have heard and done some research on that information, and I too have that concern. But nevertheless, you are correct. We do need this in our county. We have a homeless problem here. Being prior law enforcement, Sergeant DiBasilio could back us up. We have the need.
Yes, we do.
I would also say that, you know, I see the budget in here where it looks like it's about $104,000. And you mentioned, I forget who it was, but there's an additional report than what was presented. This is like page 1 of a 21.
Yes.
I'd like to have that emailed as well for some additional information. Yeah. Thank you.
So if you guys don't mind, I'd like to hear from Sergeant DiBasilio, since he's standing there.
Putting me on the spot.
I know. That's the way it should be, right?
That's a pretty big spot, though.
Sergeant DiBasilio, the Cavalier Sheriff's Office. Yes, we have a homeless problem. My main area of concern right now is Valley Springs area, and I can picture in my mind right now about 8 people that are homeless. They are staying in motorhomes here and there. They couch surf, as we call it, wherever they can find a place to stay. We've had transplants come up from San Joaquin County. San Joaquin County has a great habit of bringing their people into Wallace and dropping them off and leaving. We've had probably 4 of those in the past 6 months. A lot of those have been relocated back down to San Joaquin County. The fire actually brought up a lot of homeless folks because they knew that they could filter or get products and services for free. claiming that they were, victims of the fire. The Burson churches down there, as you well know, got hammered with that. They were stealing stuff. That's starting to obviously go away because we don't have those, churches aren't up and running with all the people from the community. But the homeless problem is still an issue. I know Arnold has probably 4 or 5 that I can think of off the top of my head. And with the snow and the cold weather, as Mr. Oliveira knows, it's a problem up there. I think the young lady, or you guys were talking about, where do you put it? That's a big concern, not only for the community itself, but for law enforcement to know where they're going to be, because a lot of these people, unfortunately, that go into these shelters aren't outstanding citizens, and they take advantage. So trying to put it someplace that's, conducive to everybody is an issue. But yeah, there's definitely a problem. There's definitely a need. We've actually tried to use the Jackson shelter, but they're always full. We've had people here that we've offered to take over there to get them someplace, but they're full. They won't take anybody. How full are you guys over there? I mean,
We are consistently.
yeah, it's just hard.
Prioritize families with children.
Yeah. So, and most of the folks that we have that I'm aware of in our community are single subjects, that female and male, both, that are homeless. So I don't know that there's a good solution. I'm not sitting on the board.
Yeah. So could you tell me about, because I know that, like at the apartments above my place there, that they seem to, they'll camp out there on the hillside?
Oh, the hillside, yeah. There's homeless camps everywhere. There's homeless camps back down behind Turner Park, and they camp wherever they can. It's just the bridge where the river runs underneath there at Highway 12 and Lower Lime Creek. There's a couple of guys camping underneath that bridge until the water got too high. So they camp wherever they can. I've caught them up in the Feds Park in Valley Springs. We catch them at the ballpark here in San Andreas. I mean, they're staying wherever they can. The old building, I draw a blank of what it's called now. Down here next to where the laundromat and stuff is on the south side of the highway, when those bushes and stuff before the building started getting used.
So you're talking about where Common Ground is now? Common Ground?
No, right here in San Andreas.
Yeah. Where the
No, not quite down that far. But anyhow, there was a building there that the bushes were so thick that you couldn't see in there. We go in there and be 5, 6 people in there just sleeping in the bushes and stuff and on their patio. So they're here. There's a lot of them here. It's just a matter of where you're going to put them. Somebody mentioned that it's a big cost. That Captain Ballard, if he was here, could tell you what the cost is for these people that when they become intoxicated, they end up getting arrested and they end up in our jail. It's an issue. Don't know that there's a good solution for you folks.
Right.
But we do need something. We absolutely need something.
So you also find them in homes that are abandoned?
A lot of abandoned homes down the Valley Springs area. We found them in abandoned homes in Arnold. Public calls in, we can deal with it and get them out of there. It's trespassing. It is a misdemeanor charge. They spend the night in jail and then they're back out. And they do. They bounce from home to home. And again, that's an issue. We don't always know that they're in those homes either because there's no power.
Right.
And they go in and out in the evenings. So
really it's costing us anyhow?
it is. One way or another, it's going to cost the county money, whether it's in the cost of the deputy going down and dealing with them and not dealing with something else that's a priority, the cost of the jail, the food in the jail, medical in the jail, there's a lot of cost to it. So overall, the county is going to pay for it one way or another.
Thank you. Thank you for your perspective.
Do we need a motion?
Do we need a motion on this? Or just a direction?
You gave direction.
So we gave direction? Okay. Thank you, Mary, for bringing that forward.
Thumbs up.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you very much. Mark, thank you. Are you part of that group right there? Oh, good. Good, Mark. All right, thank you. Okay. So So we have local hazard mitigation.
Can we take a break at this point before county council starts with this?
Yeah. How long is that break going to be? Because I may have to cut it off today. Okay, number 10.
Brian's coming. If Brian can get in.
Double booking. Nah, it's not double booking. It's how long you can take on things. But I do need something. Don't you? Okay. So we're on we're on number 10. So, Brian?
Good afternoon. Brian Moss, Assistant County Administrative Officer. Item number 10 is being brought back to the board with something that the local hazard mitigation plan was approved by the board on November 10th. That started a 90-day clock for final comments to the existing plan. And before I go any further, I want to reiterate and reemphasize that the LHMP is a living document. It can be updated every 5 years. It can be updated every year if it's necessary. So,
do we have to wait a year, or can we just update it?
Pardon me?
Do we have to wait a year, or can we just
No,
update it?
you can start doing the updates as we go along, from what I understand. So, with that said, this is the 5-year update that Cal OES recommends. And by adoption of the document, like the board did on November 10th, it allowed us as a county to access federal funds for the disaster, in this case, the Butte Fire. Very quickly, as a summary for those who, just as a reminder, the LHMP is a planning document. It's designed to reduce or eliminate long-term risk to people and property from natural hazards. The plan is required pursuant to the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000 in order for the county to be eligible to receive hazard mitigation funding from FEMA. So what you will find in your packet today are 3 different attachments. The first attachment, and this is all part of the original plan, is the LHMP projects that includes the City of Angels Camp. The second attachment is the LHMP not including the City of Angels Camp, i.e. the unincorporated part of the county. And then finally are the changes that have been made over the last 60-plus days since we brought this before the board in November. One of those changes addresses the Butte Fire incident, conveniently enough. There's also quite a bit cited in there regarding debris removal for channels for drainage. We all know about the Cosgrove Creek issue. That's actually addressed in here as well. Identifying stormwater flooding projects, future development in flood zones, and maintenance programs. Again, a planning document, again, a document designed to assist the county and provide a roadmap so that when we do have a natural disaster, and hopefully we won't all be here for the next one, but if we do have another natural disaster, we actually have a roadmap to follow for how to address some issues and also how to fund those issues. So this, again, is being brought back to the board pursuant to board direction.
We already did.
You already adopted it.
Yeah, it's done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it looks good. I mean,
May I get an approval on the changes?
Sure.
Minor they may be.
I know. Why don't we let the public speak on it first? Any public comments on this hazard mitigation plan?
Surprised not everybody is racing to be first one to comment on this. I was reading through it just as I was sitting here. But I think some of it, well, for one thing, I dislike the fact that the county's plan on each page has a consultant's emblem on each page. So we're back wondering whether this is what the consultant said that we should have, or whether it is something that has actually come from the board. And I know it's not come from the board per se, because back 90-odd days, you didn't have a chance to review it, but you approved it anyway in order to get to go ahead with the FEMA funding processes, as I understand it. If you read in there, and if you follow through with everything that's in the plan, my house, when I rebuild in Mountain Ranch, will be okay, because I will be replacing the trees. I think I have one tree that is showing sign of green, of the fir trees or the pine trees. But if you carry through with this plan, it would change the landscape, would it not, of the county if you go for a 30-foot clearance essentially without any trees? I'm referring in part to this checklist, which may not 100% be in the plan, but it's certainly sort of along those lines, because the people that you're getting to implement the plans are the people that wrote the...
Are you referring to the clearance around the homes?
Yeah, I am.
Well, that's a kind of standard, more than 30 foot, actually, it's, 100
Yeah.
feet.
So
So you're not going to really change the landscape, but hopefully you'll have a greater protection around homes. Because there's still all those acres, where there are no homes, that are going to be roughly the same.
But if you were in Arnold, or if you were, I suspect, in the center of even in the center of many of the towns that we've got, you would probably not be, and Debbie is smiling here, but you go up to Arnold, and you've not got 30-foot clearance around those houses. And the people that live in Arnold would not want there to be, I suspect, a 30-foot clearance and 100-foot,
Well, you don't have to cut all the trees down. You just want to cut the brush out.
The brush, yeah.
But the large, mature trees are not going to be fire hazard, especially if you trim them out. Well,
they're not going to be a fire hazard. I like
They won't burn, but they're not a fire hazard.
So is that the difference? Because if you implemented this,
it's.
I mean, you can still.
It's for the brush.
It's for the fuels, the ladder fuels on the ground. If CAL FIRE goes out to a place, there's, everybody has foliage around their place and trees and stuff. If it's close to something that may be hazardous, they'll have you trim it up 6 feet. Or, they have their regulations on how to do that without taking all your beautiful landscaping away.
And it's supposed to be countywide, so that's why I kind of chuckle, because
that's why I say it's supposed to
countywide.
be countywide. So let's not forget that it's the communities of Arnold and Murphys and Copper and all over. So let's not go making this lightly. And there is also the stipulation in here that houses should be retrofitted to be built out of fire-resistant materials. I mean, there's a lot in here that I'm not sure that the general public or even the board of supervisors realize the ramifications for this to be approved, that's all.
That would be new construction.
No, I don't know, it says retrofit.
Because
There are
it's-
sections that say retrofit. I'm sorry, but that's what I read.
Okay.
So just a heads up, there's a lot more to it than clearing a bush or two.
Oh, yeah.
Gentlemen, basically I agree with that lady. And if you're gonna push it, there's gonna be pushback. That's human nature. But if you can give out information, that's what's available to minimize the fire damage or fire hazard, that might be more and better reception. Instead of a wood siding on a house, maybe you can tell them, hey, there's a fiber cement housing for the house. Instead of pretty-looking roof, shingles, there could be a metal roofing on a house. If you push that, there's going to be pushback. But if you said, hey, when they go get their documentation, hey, think about this metal roofing. Think about fiber cement housing, siding. Still looks good, you can paint it look like wood and so on. So you wouldn't look, but the value of the house would go up, plus the safety would be increased. There are a lot of things that are out there that if you put it out to say, hey, take a look at it and show the benefits, that could potentially save a lot of them, at least some of the fire hazards and stuff. Thank you.
Alsagoula Taxpayer Association. We've said this before. There's an opportunity now, in the case of the fire, to explore what went on regarding the cause of the fire and what changes could be made to reduce chances of another fire in regards to the cause and the suppression efforts. And it'd be good if somebody, perhaps with the county, could gather this information together. The next stage, of course, is after fire suppression is, of course, the process of restoration, which is really the responsibility of the property owners and their insurance companies. But it's good to have the public, and especially volunteer people, to help other people to heal from the damage. And this, too, can be put in the form of this final report that perhaps Brian Moss or somebody else of his caliber can create and put together. There's not an urgency about this, but if the thought is put into it, we may not have a similar problem again, because we found out what went wrong and what we need to do to prevent this from happening again. Thank you.
There we go. Would this be an example, Joe Kelly, of the abandoned area of District 1? Would this be an example of flooding or riverine flooding? Is it covered under this plan? A legally existing non-conforming use or structure may be expanded or enlarged upon approval of a conditional use permit pursuant to Chapter 17.82 and 17.90. I suggest you get a hold of SWRCB to be sure that they get a conditional use permit when they theoretically come in to fix this problem after 11 years. According to FEMA, this is their map, and this is their information of the firm and all that, certain health hazards are also common to flood events. While such problems are not often reported, 3 general types of health hazards accompany floods. The first comes from water itself, floodwaters carrying anything that was on the ground, excuse me, that was on the ground that the upstream runoff picked up, including dirt, oil, animal waste, and lawn, farm, and industrial chemicals. Pastures and areas where cattle and hogs were kept, or their waste are stored, can contribute to polluted waters to receiving streams. This last flood season, or this last flood events that I had on my property, I went out to, I've taken pictures of it, I went out to examine what's been out there. Yeah, I have horse manure, I got cow manure, I got wood for fireplaces, I got a 6x6, 5-foot long log on the place. I have trash, I have everything. All because of the facility that causes this flooding. Now, I would think my reading of this would cause you folks to have the authority, the responsibility, and the enforcement. But I don't read anything of that enforcement side of it.
30 seconds.
And I'd like to know what you can do, when you're going to do it, and how you're going to do it. Otherwise, this document is a waste of time, a waste of the people's money. And I'm surprised that Nassau Creek is not on the schedule in here for flooding, because every agency, FEMA and the county agencies, all know about it, because I've been up here numerous times for years with these pictures and others. So, somebody answer it. Answer the question. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Keller, how many times have I been out to your place?
One where I invited you out, and the second time where you came out without my permission with Mr. Moss, and anytime Mr. Moss wants to come on my property, he's welcome.
Okay.
Did that answer that?
What
did you do? My question to you would be, what did you do after you came out and witnessed all the pictures, witnessed the area? What did you do?
Started the process, Mr.
Pardon me?
Started the process where I can.
Started the process? Well, what's happened? What was the process? Explain that.
Well, you know, that's going through whatever the process is that we have to go through to try to alleviate your problem. But, you know, when you bought that property, you already had the problem, and you should have checked it out.
Well, you know what? When you have a realtor that doesn't tell you about it, sir, you do what you can.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
I now fully disclose it, and I have a LOMA on it, so everything's cured that way. But let me just extend this just a little bit.
Mr. Kelly?
Thank you.
Calaveras County, state of California, and the
Mr.
federal
Kelly,
government
please show a
have
little bit
done
of respect
nothing.
for the board.
Nothing.
Okay.
Mr. Kelly, thank you.
Oh, you chair now?
Have a seat, Joe.
Thank you.
Well, I'll attempt to answer the first part of the question. It was stated about Foster Morrison being the consultant. That is correct. Foster Morrison met with the different agencies. That includes agencies within the county. That includes departments like CAL FIRE or agencies like CAL FIRE, et cetera. So when you see clearances, that kind of thing, yes, we all know that CAL FIRE requires a 100-foot clearance. It was absolutely correctly stated by the board. That doesn't mean cutting down everything around your residence. It's a matter of clearing really the what we call the second fuels into the minute fuels that go into the hourly fuels. We think about our own Butte fire that occurred here, but even a better example of that was the rim fire. Because it was a lot of heavy timber, and it was the second fuels were allowed to grow up several feet up into the trees. So that is parcel of why these recommendations are made. This plan does not mean that the county is going to go out and tell people that they must retrofit their homes with hardy plank or hardy panel, which is a concrete-based material, okay, fireproof material. That's not what this says. What this says is it's a recommendation. If I, as an example, built an addition onto my home, which I did, I didn't put the wood siding I had on my home, even though it matched, on the new part of the house. I put on a hardy panel and I put on hardy plank, and that was for the purposes specifically for fire. Nobody told me I had to do it, but I did that for personal protection. So that's really what this is, a guide. It's a guide for the county, it's a guide for the public, it's a guide for the people to help us build a more resilient, better prepared space around ourselves and environment. So that's the intent of this. Again, this is not law. This does not tell and nor dictate that people shall take any one specific action. What it does do is, if we have an issue, like we did with the Butte Fire, it allows us to actually identify issues like we experienced in the Butte Fire, and if that's in this plan, it allows us to access federal funds to help remediate the area.
Okay. Good. So do we have any other comments from the board then?
I believe it is on the website.
It is there. So with no further comments from the board or public, I'll make a motion to approve the changes to the local hazard mitigation plan.
Second the motion.
All right, so we have a motion by Supervisor Ponte, second by Supervisor Kearney. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Mr. Moss.
Thank you.
Chair, can we take a 5 to 10 minute break?
Are we ready for that? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. All right.
It's like a Jimi Hendrix song.
Sounds like the old days.
Okay, I think we're there.
Are we on to Susan?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think I could open like that again. Anyway, this is the Butte Fire update. Very quickly, I wanted to share with the board, a couple of you, 3 of you actually were there at different times last Friday. Thank you for attending the open house in Mountain Ranch. Very, very, very successful. Our PIO stated, gee, now they're asking when we're going to do another one. So we were very pleased with how that came off. Also, I would just like to let you know that recovery continues step by step, and we are making progress. Again, thanks to FEMA, thanks to Calaweas, and a real thanks to your county staff. Everybody's really stepped up and done a wonderful job. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to your department heads.
Before we bring the department heads up, I would like to update the board on 2 things. One is I received an email the end of last week from Jim Smith with Red Cross. If you recall, the Red Cross had offered to fund a position to help us through the recovery. I got an email stating, with a letter attached, that they are, it's a notification to their staff to establish a PO for the county so that we can go ahead and begin recruitment for that position. Also, on the RCRC grant of $150,000, I met with Calaveras Recover's case management team. In an earlier meeting, there was a lot of talk about a central place for people to go and speak to their case management team to determine the needs and unmet needs. I met with the chairs of that case management committee. We have set up an application process for them as people come in and they need help with interim or temporary shelters or health and sanitary needs for connectivities, that they will work with the caseworker, fill out the information, submit it to our office, and we will do payment on that request. So I wanted to let the board know that a process has been set up, and there is one place where people can go, and that is the case management of Calaveras Recovers.
Okay. Next.
Good afternoon, Jeff White, Calaveras County Building Official, for a little while longer anyway. Update on the permit activity is I believe we've brought in about 36 submittals in the fire area, and we've turned around 18 of those. So all the information that we are contributing to the public during submittals and so forth has been very helpful. We have a lot of virtually no resistance to what the submittals are. They're very receptive. It's going very well. They understand from their designers what is expected, and it's been pretty seamless. And I think we've done 195 electrical reconnects. So we haven't done any inspections in the fire zone yet because I think it's determined by the weather that nobody's going to do much when it's wet and sloppy out there. So I would like to dispel one rumor that I've heard is people are thinking they can't submit their plans until their lot comes back clean and certified. That's not true. We won't issue the permit until it's clean and certified. We will take the submittal prior to that. So for some reason there was some misinformation generated from who knows where that caused a little bit of confusion, but I want to set the record straight on that. So any questions?
So Jeff, on these submittals, are these folks who are rebuilding a home that you talked about?
Yes.
The 38 and the, okay.
Yeah, 36 submittals and 18 have been issued. So half of those are out.
Good, thank you.
So we're able to keep up with it so far. The amount of construction requests in the fire zone have been and haven't been overwhelming at this point in time. So kind of anticipated. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, question, Chair? Yeah, Mr. White, how's our future staffing look here for plan checking?
I have 2 plan checkers on board currently, and they are able to keep up with what they need to keep up with so far. They're relatively new on the job, so there's going to be some, some familiarity that will need to be accomplished, but both of them are very capable. Okay. So
And
at
there's
this
an
point in
item,
time, we're good.
and there's an item later on the agenda that will help. We can discuss of how we will be helping the building department move through as the requests come in and impact the staff. But there is another item on the agenda later on in the agenda.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
I wanted to make it super quick because I don't think everybody was here just to hear what I had to say.
Oh, no, we're not going to have very many more of these.
We'll get to see you we'll get to see you one more time.
One more time.
Okay.
That'll be
Maybe twice.
that's when I'll ask all the questions, the last time I see you.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Boatser.
Jason Bateser, Director of Environmental Health. Jeff's a tough act to follow, especially since he only has 3 weeks left. But anyways, give an update on debris removal. Since we last spoke, we continue to get more properties signing up, which is a good thing. We have 817 properties signed up. So we're continuing to provide outreach while we have the debris removal crews here, because our goal is to have people self-certify through cleaning up the property themselves or sign up into the ROE program, the County State Debris Removal Program. Of those 817 properties, we have 356 properties cleared. The last couple weeks have been slow moving with the weather. We start out some days with 30 crews and we're back down to 15 crews due to the heavy rains. And so that's looking at ingress, egress out of properties, worker safety, et cetera. Of those 356 properties, we have 238 properties cleared of soil samples and 294 soil samples collected. We've also increased now with the number of erosion control teams out there. There's 4 teams, so hopefully within 3 weeks to 4 weeks, they'll be caught up with the debris removal teams. That's our goal with that. So we're looking at expediting that. But again, going back to Jeff, We'll sign off on a property once we receive the approved soil sample results. We're not waiting for the erosion control to be complete as the last step of the process for issuance of a building permit. And the erosion control, I know there's been some confusion. That's just erosion control where the debris removal has taken place on the property, where the structure was. It's not outside of that footprint, so we're not competing with what Calaveras Growing is doing. They're doing a magnificent job, and so I urge private property owners that there's been some confusion that the debris removal teams will be completing all the erosion control on site. Well, in fact, they'll be doing erosion control where the footprint is, where the debris removal occurred, but not outside of that area where there may be need further erosion control due to the burned property. So with that being said, we're about 44% complete. The rumors, and I spoke about it in the first board meeting, I believe, that we did let a couple debris removal crews go due to productivity and workmanship. That does not mean we're slowing up our debris removal process. We're adding crews. Actually, there's a couple crews coming over from Lake County because they're downsizing now over there. And a couple of those crews are local people that live in Calaveras County, but we're actually working over in Lake County, come to find out. So I just found that out this past week. So we're not slowing down. Our goal is to continue to ramp up where we can ramp up, and we want to have another 6 to 10 teams out there. So we're trying to take advantage of this good weather while we have it. In addition, the roads are a big issue right now, and we understand that. And we're working with individual property owners when issues arise, also realizing that we're also not the only entity out performing work, sharing with the logging trucks, PG&E crews, et cetera. But we do realize that the debris removal trucks have some impacts to the roadways, and we'll be meeting with individual property owners, and we're making temporary repairs where need be, and making permanent repairs once we're done with the debris removal process in that area. We don't want to make permanent fixes when we're still utilizing a public roadway that's privately owned, and then working with Jeff and Krovitz and Public Works and identifying the public roadway issues. So Todd Tallheimer, who is kind of the person who fostered this program for Cal Recycle, who's primarily been in Lake County, will be here 3 days a week, and him and I will be going out in the next few weeks looking at more of the road issues throughout the area and meeting with homeowners. So I just wanted to make note of that. Last week also went out to a couple sites. We're waiting to put FEMA trailers, specifically with FEMA and the debris removal crews, and there's some interesting just site issues that we're working through, but we're going to be able to get some cleanup going. One is already going on one of those properties, and we're at the one property where the person has stopped our crews a couple times. We offer to have about 6 hours of person time to help him sort through the debris, so he feels comfortable with the debris removal crew coming in and performing the debris removal so they can place a FEMA trailer. We've tried a couple times, but he's stopped work, and so we're trying to move that forward. And when I was out there, that just was a documentation and kind of experience of how willing the crews are willing to work with individual property owners. If there's stuff that people want to keep, to have that communication firsthand with the debris removal crews, and they'll work with the individual property owners. So
And they've done that from the get-go.
yeah, they've done that from the get-go, and they continue to do that, and I stress that. Also, FEMA will be having debris monitors come in as part of the public assistance, and the oversight of debris removal, documenting ash that is, and other debris that's leaving the property. That's part of their process. The one thing that I want to focus on with that is that they are going to be hiring about 30 people as their debris monitors. So they're not bringing in people outside the area. They're hiring local people to be their debris monitors. So an estimate, we have well over 200 people employed in the debris removal process, whether it's laborers, operators, truck drivers, et cetera, as being part of the debris removal process. But I appreciate the public's patience. I know there's a lot of people in the audience that lost their residence or know somebody lost a structure. We're doing the best that we can considering the weather and other site constraints, to get to properties and work through it, and, keep pushing forward to hopefully have this complete end of March, beginning of April, weather permitting and everything else. So, any questions?
Sure. How's our trucking situation? I understand that we did receive some complaints about trucks. And question number 2, do we have our transfer site in Troyon up and running yet?
So trucks, we have received some complaints. I continue to communicate to the operations team about that. The Sheriff's Department has spoken at our safety meetings and brought up the issue with the trucks, so that's a constant, we're trying to be vigilant on that and reminding people, and really focused on it this past weekend during their safety meeting about that safety when they're driving. I've noticed it even driving behind some of the trucks and not staying between the yellow and white line. So we're continuing with that, as with all our public safety messages. The transfer station has been approved by the county. It's currently at Cal Recycle and with FEMA, waiting for the approval on that. So I had some phone calls in yesterday to see where exactly, where's the holdup, So we want to get that moving. If we don't get that moving fast, we have some other options with bins that we're looking at to increase our efficiency, but we want to get this moving forward. So the county approved it before Christmas time, and we're waiting with the state and the feds to approve that, so.
Okay, Jason, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
There are some properties up there, like I was just talking to a gentleman yesterday that has, a house, let's say it's pretty far back, and he understands that, it's pretty muddy back there, but his site is just his site, and then there's a massive wrecking yard, I guess, site further away from his place. So is there a possibility of, we know that, it's that 55 truckload type situation, but is there a way that you can go in there and at least clean his site so that person can start the rebuild process, knowing that you're going to have to clean all the other stuff up, but it's far enough away to where it isn't affected, at least him getting back on his property?
Yeah, we've had a few situations like that, and one of them is even where we were placing a FEMA MHU site. So we'll look at that site specific, where if we're able to clean up an area, the property's big enough, and we're able to get that 150-foot setback, and where we sample that area, but we can, and then move on to the other area for debris removal, that we can do that. It's site specific.
Not necessarily like right now, but maybe later.
Yeah, it's site specific, and we'll have to look at that, but it has happened.
That would be at the end of that beautiful road that you guys are trying to work on up there.
Yeah, and I know the crews are bringing in order to access some of the properties, they're bringing in gravel to the roads, to the private driveways, in order to have, to maintain that access and ingress. And they're documenting what the road is like prior to going in and after they're done, so they can restore it to the way it was.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Any other questions from the board?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jason.
Nope, thank you. Franny?
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Franny Weinrob, and I support Sharon Torrance in the Public Information Office. She couldn't be here today, so I'm going to report out to you. Since you last saw the PIO, we've been very busy. We made a trifold called Butte Fire Recovery Resources. We produced that as a handout for Calaveras Recovers, the voluntary agency that is meeting so many of the unmet needs. So that's a fold-out handout that they can give. Since the last time you saw us, Sharon Torrance had an interview on the Community Public Access channel with Mr. Lark. It was with Joel Metzger. She did a fabulous job, and I hope you get to see that on Public Access TV. We also had one of our Unsung Hero articles published in the Amador Ledger-Dispatch, and I don't know if you saw that, so I wanted to show that to the board. We also had our article on Code Red come out in that paper. And then, of course, our big event was the informational open house in Mountain Ranch Community Town Hall. Rebuilding Calaveras, a new beginning. It was a big success. We want to thank the board members who were able to come that night. We appreciate your support. We had over 105 people come and sign in the sign-in sheet, so we think it was a big success. There was a lot of networking that went on between private businesses and experts who were there to give expert advice, and also governmental agencies who came up, some as far as Los Angeles, flew in to be presenters at our event. Sharon Torrance, who I call the secret weapon of the PIO, was able to get lots of donations from local businesses so that we provided refreshments for the residents. And I think it was a big success. I have the map of the event if you didn't get a chance to see that, with a list of all of the presenters who were there. And so just to keep it short, does the board have any questions for me today?
No, I want to thank you for being there at that event. It was really well attended, actually.
We heard many comments of when can we do it again, so we consider that a big success. And I'd just like to personally thank all the help that we received from Helen Dubois and Rita from FEMA and all of the folks over at Cal OES who really brought in the big guns for the expert advice. Thank you.
Great.
Good
Thank
event.
you.
Good afternoon. Charlie Simpson with Cal OES. Before I give my quick FEMA report on manufactured housing units, I want to take a minute and just applaud the board for their efforts to help the homeless and establish a shelter and do whatever they can to alleviate homelessness. It's a pervasive problem. I'm not going to take a stand advocating or not any particular funding source. I do know that there's a series of funding sources out there that counties are taking advantage of. I see in the news just about 2 weeks ago now, Sacramento County got $2 million of a grant source for helping alleviate homelessness. So I applaud your efforts for that and all of your people that are working towards that. It's been a big item of discussion in our task force meetings of what the problem is and that it extends far beyond just survivors of the fire. So again, I applaud your efforts for that. My short report, the manufactured housing units, the report I gave you starts with the private sites. There are 3 that are occupied, 3 that are in the installation process, and another 7 that are pending. Commercial sites, San Andreas Mobile Home Park, the 2 that you see down the hill here, Bighorn Mobile Home Park, the 3 are occupied there. Foothill Terraces continues work over there. It's been a very sloggy, muddy mess over there that they are doing a work order for gravel on those sites to help keep them in decent shape. So we still have another 8 pads over there that are available for any sites are available if necessary.
So you have 20 total there?
Yeah. There are 20 pads, there are 12 MHUs on site, so the ability to bring in 8 more, which are available should they be needed.
Okay, great.
Questions from the board?
You're going to gravel it before you put them in there? Because I'll tell you what, that's a muddy mess.
That would make too much sense.
Yeah. Thank you, Charlie. I know that you've been working hard for us, and we certainly appreciate it.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Thank you, Charlie.
Anything else? Thank you.
Okay.
Just a quick observation. Kevin Wright, Commissioner. I was up on Jesus Maria and Whiskey Slide last week in conjunction with the Rangeland Summit. And what I saw was grass coming back in the areas that were pasture already. In the areas that weren't pasture, there's no grass coming back there. However, I did see BLM and Calaveras grown people both putting down rice straw and wood veneer shavings in those areas. Also, what I saw was the streams. The streams are running full. At the time I was up there, it hadn't had rain for a couple of days, and the streams are actually running fairly clear. They weren't chocolate milk. They're running pretty good, and I think the weather has been kind to us since the fire. As far as, I know that sometimes we'll have a chocolate milk situation directly after a rain, but the streams seem to clear up pretty well. And we visited with Doug Josie, and the following day, Doug Josie was a speaker at the Rangeland Summit down in San Joaquin County. And I thought that if he hasn't come and spoken to the board personally here, like I'm speaking now, it would be worthwhile to invite him to come down and talk about his experiences from the time he was a child to present day as far as managing of the land up there. Because he held those people, there were about 300 academics, he held them spellbound for about half an hour talking about his experiences. So it'd be worthwhile for us all to hear him. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay. So in case you didn't get it, Calaveras Recovers has a site in Mount Ranch Park right now. It's they have a trailer there for case management. Well, the case management's actually over at the church, but they have a space there to help you if you need help. And the folks there are really nice, very, very nice folks. So they are open from, what's that, that should be up there, huh? Yeah, I think they're open from 8 to 5. We'll go by there and check them out. Just go talk to them, say, hey, thank you, and how you doing?
So, Brian,
9 to 4.
is Jeff Krovitz here or not?
I haven't seen him for some
Okay,
time.
I have a question for you then, since you're the
guy.
The second in charge. Regarding trees,
Yes.
Bob Dean, who used to be the CCWD director from my
Yes.
district, has been concerned with overcutting, and that reflects other complaints I've received from folks in my own just personal drive, and experience up there. Is there any way we can have a checks and balance there to make sure that, because what happened is they went through a lot of these places, from my understanding of it, is they went through right after the fire and checked the trees to see if they should cut.
Right.
But
That is correct.
What Bob is saying, he's a native plants specialist, has a lot more understanding of this than I do. And he's saying there's trees up there that are definitely showing signs of life, and they're being cut. And so if there's anything we could do, I'm not sure what kind of authority we have there, if any, but maybe we could pass that to the committees that are working on the recovery, and see if there's some outreach we can do to landowners, to help people feel like the trees are really necessarily need to be removed. Because once you remove a mature couple 100-year-old oak tree or, pine tree, then, it takes a long time to come back. So, and I think that people would appreciate that if we could do something.
So is this growing on private and public, or just private properties?
Obviously, the public land is just the road and the easements there.
Right.
But it's private easements and is mostly what it's been said, but along roads as well. So I know that with roads, we have Public Works that could possibly do something there. So, but then maybe if there's somebody who could outreach to PG&E and see what they're doing, if anything, to address that problem.
We can do that. I will tell you that Public Works did hire an arborist, and they went through the public, or they are going through, if they haven't gone all the way through, all of the public lands to identify which trees are dead and which ones are alive for that specific purpose, because we certainly don't want to take them all down in the public right away either if they're alive. So that's already being done. I think that as far as private property, I think that's more of maybe some kind of campaign we can do. Maybe we can do something through the PIO to remind people to check with the farm advisor or to check with, you know, those in Calaveras Grown or Master Gardeners or even Cal-Am. I would say Cal-Am especially, who was here this morning, because they are retired foresters and really know their.
Well, it's not necessarily the knowing the stuff, it's the getting them to slow down a little bit.
Right.
Because what you have is very aggressive tree cutters out there.
Right.
Which is, you know, they have their place, that's for sure. But I just want to make sure that, you know, they're not, you know, that we're looking after some of the landowners out there that may not want their trees cut or may not know that their trees are being cut. So if there's any way we can...
Because a lot of those lines go through private property, and they're trimming them out.
Oh, okay.
And so those folks are, you know, some of those folks are getting pretty upset.
We certainly can reach out to PG&E, who I think is the one that's doing a lot of the cutting of the
Yeah, that'd be
PG&E's
great.
easements to see what process they're doing. We will reach out and see what we can find out from PG&E.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
I've also talked to a couple of those folks, the tree cutters, and some, you know, they're pretty darn educated in this. And what they're telling me is there's a lot of drought ridden trees that are damaged from the drought, but they're also saying that there's a lot of bug infestation. And so a lot of the trees that they're taking out are bug ridden. So.
And you'll remember that when we started talking about this, just after the fire was extinguished, that the dying trees will put out something called trypamine, and that actually attracts the bark beetle. Unfortunately, when the bark beetle comes to the attractant of trypamine, they don't attack the dead trees or the burned trees, they attack the live trees next to them, and that's a real concern for us, for the tree mortality issue. So yes, indeed, going back to the issue at hand, we can certainly contact PG&E. I will do that. Also, one last real quick thing, and that is there has been lots of concern regarding the cell on wheels, or what they call the cow in Mountain Ranch. AT&T had put a cow for reception out in Mountain Ranch during the recovery, during the fire, and then right after the fire, and then during the recovery process. What they have informed us is that they have restored the level of service back to that area that was there before the fire. Now the problem is this: there really wasn't much cell coverage before the fire. So what has happened is people, and I would do the same thing, have gotten used to being able to call out of town when the cow was there. Now the cow's gone and they're back to what they were before. So I don't know where that's eventually going to land. I can tell you that Cal OES and FEMA do not have any way of bringing a cow in. I've already looked into that. Charlie and I have also discussed it. But I just wanted to bring that out in the open so people are aware what's going on.
Brian?
Yes, sir.
We have a scheduled meeting with the AT&T rep at 11 o'clock on Friday.
Excellent.
It'd be great if you could come.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so is that it for the Butte Fire Recovery? All right, great. Any questions from the public or comments?
Hi, I've got about 3 different things. I did go to Calaveras Recovers and signed up in the church. Very nice people. I do have a concern with the amount of questions and the personal level of the questions that were being asked, that they be very cognizant of privacy and confidentiality, and because I don't mind telling them, but I wouldn't want it to become absolute general knowledge and just passed from one
I
place to
think
the other.
that's one of the reasons why they have it there separate from the other, the recovery trailer as well. So, that's the law. They have to keep your information quiet.
And the case management committee is made up of people who have worked with Health and Human Services, so they are trained and they are bound by confidentiality. So that shouldn't be a concern.
That's a good thing to know. I was at Frank's, and by the checkout, Frank's is the Frank's Cafe in McCullamy Hill, great sandwiches, etc. There were a stack of these information folders from California Christ. Well, this is the. In fact, there were just this stack of folders, so I took one. And there's various information from CalFresh, from Butte Fire Animal Assistance, PG&E, etc. And also from copies of informational announcements written by Sharon Torrance. And what stood out to me, there are 5 of them here, is that the first 2 that are included in here, or presumably the first 2, because I'm not sure, because they don't have dates on. So there's one on this October 5th, one on October 7th, that are dated. And then there are 3, and I suspect more recent ones, for immediate release. And I've looked both sides, and there's no date. Well, I would think if these are time-sensitive materials, in fact, somebody I spoke to called it rather juvenile,
30 seconds.
And said that it would be better to have when it was written and when it was to be released, even, 2 separate dates. The other thing concerns Code Red and my signing up. I signed up and registered for my home phone, but when you go to sign up for your mobile phone, you're asked to input a mobile phone provider, and they do not give an option for track phone or straight talk, say. But if you belong to Appalachia Communications or Bluegrass Wireless, or Illinois Communications, there's a little check that you can check for that. Now, I tried not putting anything in, and the computer wouldn't accept it. I finished up because I know TracFone uses multiple of the big companies around, and I just selected AT&T. But if I'm going to sign up for an emergency notification system on my cell phone, I want to be assured that they've actually got me down. I'm not even sure why they need that information. Could just be a marketing thing, but you're in good hands if you're with Appalachia Communications.
And I will have our IT department check into that. You said it was TracFone, and what was the other one that you mentioned that was not on there?
Well, I was thinking of Straight Talk. I through Walmart. Thank you.
I have a question. You don't mind?
Come on.
It might not be too irrelevant at this point, but on 9/9 of September the 9th is when the fire had started. And I had seen plenty of aircraft at the time, because I could see it from the top of my hill coming over from the Amador side to the Calaveras side. But in the morning of 9/10, I didn't see any aircraft except for one helicopter that tried to fight the fire for hours. And where he had to go was all the way to Hogan Dam and come over to McCallamy Hill. It took him 11 minutes to try to fight this fire that was coming over the hill towards Mount Ranch and all of us. I was I was in total view of the fire at the time, and I was down at Jesus Maria and Harbor Ranch Road watching it come over, and I was wondering where our airstrike was. Because if we had a terrorist attack in any way, I was wondering where America was. Because that to me was a terrorist bomb. And it became that way because it looks like an atomic bomb over at my house. And I am full of nothing but garbage. That's all I'm left with. Well, pretty soon somebody's going to come with a dumpster and throw all my good stuff away that I thought was good that got burnt up. My main question was, where was the airstrike on 9/11? And you know what? You know what the people tell me? They tell me that there was a watershed issue that we couldn't, Calaveras County was stricken from doing anything because Amador still had the rights to our fire that was coming our way. So Calaveras was grounded. Now I'm just looking for answers because none of the CDF can answer any of that for me. They're denying it. I want to know. Can any one of you answer why we didn't have any aircraft over, why we were unfortunately on fire?
30 seconds.
Smoke? No, it wouldn't be smoke. What was it? Because we had plenty of 747s going over on 9/9, and then all of a sudden, there wasn't any on the next morning. 2 helicopters, as I watched a house incinerate from the top of the lookout over there on McCollamy Hill, disintegrated with 1 helicopter. I couldn't do anything, and basically it was like a bad dream when you wake up and you can't do anything about it. I need to, the next time possibly, we need to get more of an airstrike out there to protect Calaveras County from never this happening once again. Now there is another part of Calaveras County that hasn't burnt. And if that catches on fire, I think we, the people, need more aircraft to stop it. Because there's a 5-mile radius where their smoke isn't, and you could start putting a line there. Well, there was none of that, and I swear to it. I don't know, it feels like a terrorist attack to me. It feels like a nuclear bomb where it hit all of Mount Ranch and every one of my friends, every one of my neighbors. I've been here 47 years, and now all of my devastation, you're cutting all the wood down and basically just massacring it. Whether it's alive, dead, or anything, these people are coming in here and just tearing it down. You got these truckers in here, and they...
Sir.
Yes?
So your time is actually up for public comment.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
All right, that was my speak.
All right, good, thank you. All right, any other public comments?
Can't follow that.
Sure you can. It could be a kindness zone comment.
Hello. Dustin Peterson. I hear every time I hear the cleanup crews talk, I hear about them working with homeowners. And the entire time, my property's already been cleaned up. I'm very thankful of it. I was impressed with the speed that it happened. But I hear that they're working with homeowners, and the only people that ever worked with me were the two people in charge on site. And I could talk to them personally if I went out and talked to them. Nobody ever called me. I have not one phone call that anybody's ever called me to say they're coming to do this, we've finished to do that. Erosion control just came recently, and I've been to the D-Rock plant 3 times asking them about what is the erosion control. Are you going to come put wattles? Are you spreading straw? What's going on? They never have any straight answers for me. They just say they're backed up and get to me when they can. And then they come, and I wasn't even there. I'm displaced in a FEMA trailer, and so when they came, I wasn't there again. No phone call, no nothing. And all they did was put down, I think it's 4 wattles on my property. They put them in arbitrary areas. They didn't dig them in. I know when you put down a wattle, I know this for myself, you have to dig a little trench, and then you put the wattle down and you put the stakes down to where it stays put and it catches the debris as it comes down. If you just put them down and stake them down, this stuff finds its way underneath and it just makes little channels. That's what's happened on my property. And the one wattle, the biggest one that they put down, actually redirected the flow of mud into the one storage area I had left that was dry. I had some more car parts and stuff there, and all that just got covered in black soot because it went right around their wattle. And I could have easily directed them not to do that because I've been there on this property. I've seen the rivers flow through. I know where it needs and I know where it doesn't need. But every single wattle they put down, except for maybe one, was completely ineffective, and it's in my way. I have to actually move them to be able to get access to my home site. I've got an RV there and stuff. So that's on the wattles. That's on the erosion control. Also, the grading. My pad was a graded pad. I expected it to be graded when they left, and I communicated that over and over again on a daily basis as I watched dump truck after dump truck of dirt leave my home. I said, are you guys going to leave this graded for me so it's not a mud pit? They said yes, but of course I now have a mud pit and it's ungraded, and D-Rock keeps telling me, well, that's just because of the weather. I also live about 500 yards off of a maintained road. That 500 yards of road is a dirt road that these... You all seem distracted.
I was looking for Jason to point you to him to talk to you, because he's Jason Baser's the guy.
Gotcha.
So if you...
There he is.
Yeah. So talk to that guy right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will.
Yes.
Thank you. Just to finish really quick, sorry. I live about 500 yards off of a county maintained road. That road's been devastated with the large excavator coming in and out and all those dump trucks. They still have a large property beyond me. They're going to come in and do this again. This is the first year I've never been able to get up my own road. Foothill Septic came early on, gave me a porta potty, which I need to have my family there, but they can't get in to pump it. Campora has a program to replace temporary propane tanks. He also can't get to me to place a propane tank. All this is directly due to the road devastation from the cleanup. Thank you.
He's out there right now.
Yeah, go talk to him now.
Don't let it lie.
Don't sit back in.
Okay, any other public comments? All right, thank you. Any board comments? All right, let's move on to the next agenda item.
We're going to skip the next one, right?
Yeah.
No, that's correct.
So that would be the next. So we're going to skip agenda item 12 and get right to the mix. Okay. So we're going to agenda item 13.
Just a couple minutes for us.
We're going to take just a couple of minute breaks so they can set up, all right? Man, I keep getting this call from you. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to County Council, and she can begin the emergency ordinance issues with medical cannabis.
Thank you, Chair. Megan Stedfeld, County Council, Julie Moss Lewis, Deputy County Council, and Peter Maurer, Planning Director. Thank you. Sorry. First, I wanted to start with the medical marijuana ordinance that encompasses both items 13, 14, 15, and 16. After the direction that we obtained on December 22nd, when we started putting an ordinance together, we realized that there were additional changes that needed to be made to our existing code, and that's what what 14, 15, and 16 is about. So what I would ask is if we could, I don't want to say consolidate the issues, but when we have the discussion, for the discussion to encompass all 4 items. And so when public has the opportunity to speak, the public comment would be on all 4 items. Also, for urgency items, urgency ordinances, it requires a 4/5 vote of the board. I know that Chair Edson has to leave at 4:30, so we will make this as quick as possible. With that, I wanted to first start with, in December, we made you aware that there was a potential that the March 1 deadline was going to be extended. I wanted to make sure that the board is aware that AB 21 was introduced beginning of January, and at this point, or as of yesterday, it has been passed at the Senate floor on a 35-3 vote. AB 21 does in fact remove the March 1 deadline in its entirety, as well as address some issues regarding the county's ability to ban and regulate personal and patient caregiver grows. At this point, it is going to be moving on to the State Assembly. It's anticipated that it will be heard in the Assembly Local Government Committee first, and then on to the Assembly as a whole. At this point, it's anticipated or it's hoped that AB 21 will land on the governor's desk and hopefully will be signed within the next 10 days. That is the hope, but we do not know if it will ultimately get there and if he will actually sign it. So because that is the current status of the March 1 deadline, we wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that and how that implicates an urgency ordinance. So we did, with the urgency ordinance, I will turn it over to Ms. Moss-Lewis to go through some of the basics of what our office drafted. We did use the direction that the board gave on the 22nd. If hypothetically the board would like to see modifications to this urgency ordinance, certainly we are open to direction, open to additional public comment on it. We can modify it accordingly. There is the option of, because the March 1 deadline is still technically in effect unless and until AB 21 is passed, that we can bring an item back to the board at the end of February if hypothetically AB 21 is not put into place by then, with any changes that we are directed to make today. If AB 21 is in fact passed and we don't have to worry about the March 1 deadline, what I would look for is whatever direction we get from the board today. If the board doesn't want to take, or if we don't get a 4/5 vote to adopt the urgency ordinance before the board today, would be to make any changes and put it through the normal final ordinance process, which would go to the Planning Commission first and then to the board for final adoption. Because without the March 1 deadline looming over us, we really need to, the urgency isn't there. So we can take it, although I don't want to push it out, we need to stay on top of it. We would go through that process instead of it coming back to the board at the end of February. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Moss-Lewis for further discussion on the actual ordinance.
Good afternoon, Julie Moss-Lewis, Deputy County Counsel. I prepared for the board last night in quite a rush a cheat sheet, which I've also provided for the public up on the podium, a number of copies of it. And the idea was just to help guide the board and the public through some of the legalese. I don't know if I have enough copies. I'm going to wait a few minutes until everybody passes it out. Okay, I'm going to count down from 10, and then I'm going to start my presentation. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 10 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay. Sorry, I should have passed this out earlier, but Again, this chart was just me looking at the draft ordinance, which you should already have, and trying to quickly put together an easy read version of it. There shouldn't be any surprises in the chart. In fact, it's possible that I made some mistakes because of the rush I was in last night. Again, I'm just going to walk through a couple of main principles or highlights, not the entire ordinance in here. We'll kind of go through the different columns, starting with zones. The direction from the board was to utilize the zoning tables recommended by Mr. Maurer at the study session. This was done, and I went through and summarized the zones in the chart. Again, zoning, as I'm sure the board knows, is a policy decision, and it's completely subject to Board of Supervisors' direction. There's no legal advice from our office, yay or nay, with respect to zoning. Permit type, which is next to each of the zones, you'll see ZCC there. That'll be explained in a second. As we talked about at the study session, the state requires local jurisdictions to first give some sort of document indicating local permission before it will issue any commercial cannabis licenses to an applicant. To make sure that all those commercial cannabis operations in our county are going to in fact be licensed by the state before we allow them to proceed, we came up with a three-step process at the study session for commercial cannabis applicants. First, obtain tentative local permission through the planning department or potentially the planning commission, depending on the type of permit. Then go to the state for a license, then come back and have the local permission validated. And because we have to give a temporary validation, even for operations that are not going to need an administrative use permit or conditional use permit, we came up with this zoning clearance certificate. Is that over-the-counter permission? That's what ZCC stands for in the chart. There are some cannabis operations that are going to need an AUP, administrative use permit, or conditional use permit, CUP, under Mr. Maurer's chart. These folks are going to go through the permit approval process, including if it's a CUP, the Planning Commission, get their licenses from the state, come back to have them stamped by planning, at which point they can begin the use. There are, again, as we said, those that will not require a formal permit under Mr. Maurer's chart will simply go to the counter at the planning department and demonstrate that they satisfy the local laws and the state laws, and at that point be able to get a zoning clearance certificate if they don't need a state license first. Because this is a new type of land use permission and the zoning clearance certificate, and because, like any other type of land use permission that's issued by the county, it can be revoked if the use falls out of compliance with state or local law. I did have to add it to our existing Title 17 language concerning validation and revocation of land use permits, and that's the reason for the changes to chapters 1790 and 17100. All that does is bring zoning clearance certificates into our existing language and validation revocation scheme. Next column on the chart, total canopy area on the parcel. As we discussed at our study session, the state licenses for cannabis cultivation vary based on what type of light is used to grow the plant, and with one narrow exception, total canopy size of the plants. It's not based on the number of plants except for one license type. And so for purposes of drafting the ordinance, including the definition of total canopy area written into the draft ordinance, staff assumed that total canopy area would include the space between the plants. And the reason for that is that way a measurement could just be taken around the perimeter of a growing area, and individual plant measurements would not have to be made, which would be, if they had to do that, would be less efficient, make enforcement more expensive. That is a board call at this point. We don't have any state direction on what they meant by total canopy size. And even if the state did intend total canopy size to be not including the space between the plants, it would be up to the board whether they wanted to include the space between the plants. So for now, the staff assumption is that it does include the space between the plants. We've already discussed permit validation and why we built it into the draft ordinance. Again, the assumption, the ordinance also should be noted, requires permit validation only for commercial cannabis uses, not for personal or caregiver grows. The assumption there is that planning would be able to issue or deny a zoning clearance certificate for personal or caregiver grows at the counter based only on comparing the application to existing laws and regulations, so you don't have to wait for the result of some sort of intervening state decision. And then going to the next column, priority processing. I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about that because I know there have been many questions and requests to the board over the last several meetings about medical cannabis. And I wanted to explain why our recommendation in the dispensary ordinance is to only provide any sort of acknowledgement that might be used for priority processing for existing dispensaries that have existing permits. And the reason is this. Like most counties, Calaveras County follows principles of permissive zoning. We have, which means if a proposed land use is not already in the zoning code, it is not allowed. And 1704.010 of our code does indicate that no land use shall be commenced, enlarged, or altered unless it is permitted in the zone in which the land is located. This is very typical of most counties in the state of California. So that would mean that if a land use involving cannabis is not already mentioned in any part of the zoning code, there is a presumption under our own code and permissive zoning principles that that land use is not allowed. When there is a land use involving cannabis already on the books, such as our Chapter 1791 regarding dispensaries, anyone operating a dispensary in compliance with that chapter can be deemed in compliance and in good standing with existing local law, because there is a law. And so the relevance of all of this involves the new state law under MRSA, where a commercial cannabis operation can demonstrate, if it can demonstrate that it was operating in good standing and in compliance with all local laws by January 1st of this year, it can get priority processing at the state level for its license application. By January 1st of this year, all the county had was a dispensary ordinance, and based on that fact, and the fact that we are a permissive zoning county, the draft ordinance was drafted by staff under the assumption that only those 3 dispensaries with valid permits as of 1/1/16 would qualify for priority processing. And so the recommendation there is to provide that only for those 3 dispensaries. The board could certainly choose to do otherwise, but the county council's office is recommending that we not dilute the permissive zoning ordinance that we already have. Other information, I put some but not all other information in that last column regarding specific units or specific types of licenses. The board wanted 8-foot fences around all cultivation operations, whether they were commercial or not. That's included in the ordinance. And I included some other information on specific uses that the board might want to see front and center based on our study session. I also provided, after the chart, some information about state law regarding license types. When I refer to things like a type 1 license or a type 6 or 7 license, these are state law definitions that the board does not have any authority to change. So the state will have minimum recommendations or requirements that go along with each of those licenses, and I wanted the board to have that in front of it when the conversation is being had about our ordinance. I also included information from the state law about compatible licenses so that the board can see quickly what types of medical cannabis operations can have another type of license under state law and which ones cannot. There are some combinations that are illegal under state law. And other than that, I'm not going to go over the rest of the pages or every aspect of the pages, just a couple of main points. Of course, a landowner can prohibit any marijuana use on his or her land. That's a given, and that is included in the ordinance. The ordinance does contain the board's direction that a lawful residence will be required on any outdoor or mixed-light cultivation parcel or on an adjacent parcel under common ownership. The ordinance has a provision saying that a separate permit is needed for each separate parcel that contains a medical cannabis use. Separate permit for each medical marijuana use on a single parcel is also required in the ordinance. We have all cultivation 1,000 feet from a sensitive use, and visual screening from sensitive uses. We also have visual screening from sensitive uses for other non-cultivation marijuana operations. We have a provision for consent to reasonable inspection for anybody getting a county permission to operate a commercial cannabis operation. We have a provision that all medical marijuana certificates and permits expire in 1 year and must be renewed. That mirrors the state law. And finally, we do have 30-foot setbacks for all outdoor mixed light cultivation. So that's not everything that's in the ordinance, but I think I've covered the main points in this presentation in case there's questions about it, and as the board has additional questions, and myself, Ms. Stedfeld, or Mr. Maurer can answer them.
Good afternoon, Good afternoon, Peter Maurer, Planning Director. I just want to touch on a couple of key zoning points. I think Julie covered most of it, but there are some fairly significant decisions that need to be made. We discussed this to some degree at the study session, and these have to do with the zoning for dispensaries, zoning for indoor cultivation, the type of permit required for outdoor cultivation, and the medical cannabis cultivation in the agricultural preserve zone. I'll start with dispensaries. One of the most significant changes is the recommendation that we increase the number of zones that dispensaries are allowed to be considered in, but increase the type of permit, up the level of permit to a conditional use permit rather than administrative use permit. We've had some difficulties in the past with the issue with down zoning, so that someone can create the one specific zone of professional office in order to locate a dispensary, and it seems to be an ineffective way to limit the numbers of dispensaries if that is the desire of the board. It may be more appropriate to, if there's a desire to try to limit the numbers, to create a limitation based on geography, X number of dispensaries within a supervisorial district, for example. So if that is a concern of getting too many dispensaries, I would recommend that we look at that aspect rather than trying to limit to a very narrow zone that's not equally distributed throughout the county. And what we're finding is that because of other restrictions, there just aren't any that are available for that use, and then requiring spot zoning and down zoning. We've dealt with that previously. The second issue I want to address is indoor cultivation. I've received some comments from individuals about the limit of indoor cultivation to just the industrial zones, M1, M2, and M4. There's a good argument either way to expand that into the C2 zone as well as to limit it from the C2 zone. I don't have a real strong feeling about that. I think it's appropriate for large-scale indoor cultivation to be an industrial zone, but our general commercial in a way serves as a light industrial as well. So I think that there could be a reason to extend that to the C2 zone, but I'll leave that up to public comments and your deliberation on that issue. You also requested at the last meeting that we have some input from the Ag Commissioner on cultivation in the Ag Preserve Zone on lands on Williamson Act. I have met with Kevin, he's in the audience, and I'm sure I'll have a chance to ask him questions, but the Department of Conservation, which oversees the Williamson Act, is working on regulations right now. At this point in time, we are recommending that it not be permitted because we just don't know what the effect of cultivation in the Williamson Act would be on Williamson Act contracts. I do know, however, I've been told that a number of property owners within the Williamson Act are currently cultivating, and so that will be an issue that we'll have to discuss today. The final issue is on my prior recommendation that a conditional use permit be required for the Class 2 and Class 3 type outdoor cultivation in most of the zones. I've thought about it some more, and knowing that we have somewhere in the range of maybe 500 or 800 cultivators out there, the thought of trying to process that number of conditional use permits just sort of staggers me. The other thought I have is that I don't know what we actually would gain from going through a lengthy permit process for outdoor cultivation as currently regulated by under the state scheme. I am currently recommending that we modify the chart so that the same type of zoning clearance certificate would apply where we have currently a conditional use permit on that chart. So if you turn to page, it's 173 in your packet. It's under Article 2, 1793, 180, and it starts on the bottom of the page and goes over to the next page. The second to last and third to last column identify a conditional use permit in all of those zones. And I am suggesting now that the zoning clearance requirement be the type of review that we do. We would still do an inspection. We would review that. So that is a fairly significant change from what we discussed at the last meeting. But I don't know what benefit we would gain from going through a conditional use permit for cultivation.
Can you clarify that, Peter? Are you talking about the residential ag rule, residential general forest, general ag 1, and...
So in the cheat sheet that Julie passed out, on the first column, the last two rows, it shows the outdoor type 2 and 2B cultivation, 3 and 3B, and it's in the unclassified, the res ag, rural residential, general forestry, and A1. We show it listed as CUP, and I'm recommending that would be the zoning
AUP?
Clearance certificate
Okay.
instead.
Thank you.
With that, I think that ends our presentation. There are a few other minor edits that we have. If it is the intent today to adopt an ordinance, we want to go through and clean those up. But if we're going to not adopt an ordinance today, we can deal with that either through subsequent meetings or through the cleanup. So, do you have any further questions of us?
I have another question. When you, going back to the dispensaries, currently it's allowed in C2. Is that right?
Our current code allows it in the professional office CP only.
CP, okay, and is that an AUP or CUP process? AUP. And so your thoughts right now, I know before we opened it up, but your thoughts, you mentioned about we limit per supervisory district. Can you repeat that?
That would only be something that if we decide there is a need to limit it. I know there has been some concern that by opening it up that we could have a plethora of dispensaries and undercut those that are existing and create a bunch of abandoned stores. You know, we don't regulate how many gas stations can go into a community. We don't regulate how many grocery stores. I think that the market will take care of itself as far as how many dispensaries a community can support. And I'd rather than trying to regulate that in some way, I would prefer that that be a product of the marketplace. But if there is a desire to regulate it, to limit the numbers of dispensaries that we have in our county, that would be a way that we could do it. I don't know what that magic number is, but something we could certainly investigate if that's a desire of the board to move in that direction.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
You guys finished?
Yeah.
You okay? Okay, public comment, please. So you guys have 3 minutes, and please try not to repeat what somebody else said.
Chaz Tomaszewski, Executive Director of the Calaveras Cannabis Alliance. First thing I want to say is thank you. We know that the timing of this issue is not convenient, and that the work involved has been extreme. And we want to express our gratitude at the time and care that has been taken by all parties involved. You're going to hear today from some people who have many thoughtful questions and criticisms in regards to particular points of policy included in the draft ordinance. I want to make it clear that for most of us, our intention as a group is to approach these topics from a standpoint of respectful collaboration. Our desire is to work with the county to discuss not only things that we believe we need or deserve via this ordinance, but also the things that we are willing to compromise on in order to ensure the county is a safer, more prosperous place. Please know that our comments today represent a collaborative effort coming from a thankful place rather than a critical effort coming from a selfish one. In regards to the ordinance in general, while it is not perfect, it is solid. CCA understands that politics is compromise and that the interests of an industry are not more important than public safety or environmental protection. And from this standpoint, we believe that the county has done a good job considering the timeline involved. Although there are a couple things in the language of the draft that will make things quite difficult for certain members of our industry, there is nothing it contains that will make things downright impossible for anyone, and this is a good place to start. With that, I'd like to address some of the very few issues we see with the proposed draft ordinance. I will do so only briefly, as others will be discussing these issues in more detail. First and foremost is the requirement of CUPs and AUPs for commercial growing. It is our position that the cost of CUPs, when combined with other fees and taxes on the local and state levels, would be prohibitive for commercial growers. Additionally, the fact that these permits must process through the Planning Commission or Planning Director directly represents a bottleneck that certainly cannot handle hundreds of applications in just a few months. We also firmly believe the public posting requirement of these permits would be a massive barrier to voluntary enrollment, as during the transitional period of the new ordinance, wherein good policy has been implemented, but the presence of slowly dwindling crime still persists, the public posting of this information would leave growers irresponsibly vulnerable. Second is indoor growing being restricted to industrial zones. CCA agrees that indoor operations must involve appropriate water treatment and safe power supply. However, we propose that this problem could be more appropriately addressed by simply allowing indoor cultivators to grow in any zoning where outdoor growing is allowed and requiring indoor growers to install the necessary infrastructures to do their business, rather than limiting them to zoning where this infrastructure already exists. Third is the ban of cultivation in ag preserves. At the very least, I understand the difficulties Mr. Maurer presented, but at the very least, we believed it would be prudent to provide an exemption from the ag preserve cultivation ban for those that have begun the exit procedure, so we are not displacing some of our best and brightest. Lastly, I would like to address personal caregiver grows. The draft ordinance requires that patients undergo a criminal background check and other substantial processing, such as site plan submittal. If this is truly what the county requires to allow the existence of these grows, we ask that the county put the financial burden of these processes on the commercial growers of this county, so that we may bear this burden on behalf of the least able of our community. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Silvio. I'm from Calaveras County resident, and I'm here to talk to you about the Agricultural Preserve Program. According to the current ordinance draft, Calaveras cannabis cultivation is not permitted in agricultural preserve zoning. I believe this would exclude many county residents from obtaining permits. Considering removing property from an ag preserve can generally take up to 10 years, depending on the landowner's contract. I hope that the board would reconsider this zoning to be allowed. Let's think about who's in an ag preserve and who the current ordinance would exclude. It's people with large tracts of land. Ag preserves were created to preserve agricultural and open space lands by discouraging premature and unnecessary conversion to urban uses. It's people who are experienced and have been involved with agricultural activities in the past. And it also tends to be people and old families who've been established in this county for many years and generations. The new laws designate cannabis as an agricultural product. I'm not aware of the reason ag preserve zoning is not allowed under the current county ordinance. But if it's because landowners who are in ag preserve contract pay less in taxes for contributing to the agricultural production under the Williamson Act, Could there be an option to pay more until a contract expires, which could be up to 10 years depending on what they've been in, what kind of contract they've signed up with lately? I've spoken with other ranchers and large landowners who would be excluded under the current submitted ordinance. I myself am a fourth-generation Calaveras County resident whose family has been practicing sustainable agriculture here for over 70 years. And we want to continue to do so and have the opportunity to be part of this new agricultural industry of cannabis. Thank you.
Chair Edson,
Yes.
I wonder if it'd be appropriate to ask them to hold the applause. There's a lot of people that want to testify, and every time they do that, it slows the testimony down.
Yeah. You guys don't mind, please?
Maybe at the end of it, they can all give one great big applause.
How will we know if we did good, though? Just joking. Mark Bolger, Mountain Ranch. I'd like to thank the board, county council, planning department. I think that this draft ordinance is a great start, especially given the short amount of time that it had to be put together. I think working under that March 1st deadline has been an arduous process for not only this county, but counties and cities across the state. I do have several issues I'd like to bring up with the draft ordinance, specifically Article 2, 17.93.180, which is page 173 of the agenda packet. I'm thrilled to hear that the planning director has offered some new insight on that. I'd like to add something to the arguments against a conditional use permit. A conditional use permit is completely redundant for operations that will comply with the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board enrollment in their cannabis cultivation waste discharge regulatory program. Calaveras Cannabis Alliance, since the inception of this program, has been active at the state level, speaking with these regulators on this. Trey Sherrill, who is one of the gentlemen spearheading this program out of the Reading office for the WQCB, has stated that the fees extracted from their program already cover the same environmental oversight at the state level that a conditional use permit seeks to address through fish and game fees. Because of this environmental oversight that's already being provided to us at a state level for participants in their program, I think that that negates the need for a conditional use permit for people that have received a permit from the WQCB. Also in conversations with Joshua Huntsinger, who is the Placer County Ag Commissioner, who under their ordinance was charged with the task of being in charge of the regulatory program. He personally feels, and he believes that the county will follow suit, that a conditional use permit doesn't lend itself to agricultural activity. The reason being that it's a very arduous process at the start, and there's a lot of oversight at the very beginning. But once it's been accomplished by the business, or farmer in this case, there's not a lot of additional oversight that's followed up. With conventional agriculture, the ag department will offer a operator ID number, pesticide use, monitoring. I think that, although that in our county it's going to be going through the planning department, that a zoning clearance certificate does make much more sense for operations that will be in compliance at a state level.
30 seconds.
Also, the Article 2, 17.93.200, subsection A, number 15, deals with well permits. Calaveras did not have an ordinance in place that required permitting for new well construction until 1998. Many parcels in the counties have well drilled prior to this mandate. I understand the need for a legal, environmentally sound irrigation supply, but the county must provide a way for farms with unpermitted wells to be in compliance with the proposed ordinance. Thank you.
Reed Larson, Mountain Ranch. We realize there's many other issues facing the county right now deserving of your attention, so we thank you for all your time. Fortunately, even if and when the March 1st deadline is repealed, Calaveras is already poised to be ahead of the game, the legislative game. Having said that, allow me to make a few suggestions considering the draft ordinance. As it pertains to the patient caregiver language in the draft, right now a resident can only cultivate for up to only 2 other patients in addition to him or herself. The Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act allows for a patient caregiver garden to include up to 5 patients. If you were to stand by such strenuous hurdles such as Department of Justice background check for the individual cultivating, We should allow for the maximum number of patients to be provided for. In short, 2-patient limit should be changed to 5 patients. Another issue we would like to see changed in the ordinance relates to sensitive use areas. While CCA understands and respects the setbacks from daycares and churches, its prudent language be introduced to support a cultivation site established first, should a sensitive use area be created after the garden or farm already existed. This might be a relatively unlikely scenario, but there's nothing in the ordinance to make sure a state and locally compliant medical cannabis farm doesn't get shut down due to a neighbor trying to open a daycare or any other youth facility you're worried about. The ordinance also states violation of any of the rules set forth in the document may draw up criminal penalties, including up to 6 months in jail. To our understanding, this means that a grower who has submitted all the paperwork, paid all the money, and gone through the process required by the county to be legitimate could face jail time. And this could be only if they fail to abide by 1 out of maybe 50 requirements. CCA believes this is highly unnecessary and completely counterproductive policy. CCA advocates for cannabis industry being regulated by like any other comparable industry: agriculture, botanical extraction, alcohol, transportation, and distribution. To our knowledge, nowhere else in the industries are these criminal penalties assigned to those who violate rules outside the purview of criminal activity. Again, I would like to reiterate my appreciation for the board and the county for taking this seriously. The direction of the county has been proactive and sincere. And in closing, I'd like to encourage you guys to keep asking questions, keep visiting and engaging your medical cannabis patient neighbors, and keep doing what's best for the county. Thank you.
Eric Williams, I'm a West Point resident. I just wanted to comment on one technical point in the bill. On page 167, it says that within 1 year of you passing the law, it goes into effect. That's number 3. And then on number 8, it says that to be in compliance, we need to have our state permits and our county permits. And then on page 171, it says again that for any of the use for the permit we're going to get, the use can only continue if we get the validation from the state. And I just wanted to clarify, the only permits we're going to have from the state is our water board and our BOE. There will be no state permits until probably, they're going to come out in 2018, but they won't be here probably until 2019. So for us to come into compliance with your law next year, you're requiring documents that aren't going to come out for 2 years after that point. So the only thing we're going to have for this upcoming year is our water board notice of intent and our board of equalization, and then with that we can come get a county permit. But that's all we're really going to have until 2 years, so then we can take those permits to the state and at that point bring it back. But how it's written right now is basically no activity would be legal in 1 year and nobody would be able to get the permits to basically be legal. So just wanted to point that one point out. Thank you.
Thank you. Arthur Hodge. I represent a number of property owners and cultivators in the county. I spoke on the 22nd of December, perhaps you'll recall. I want to first start by thanking staff and county council for drafting something under the gun here that appears to be complete and ready for a couple of adjustments and for voting. I want to point out a couple of things I found just to make sure that they're noted. First of all, in section 1793-210E, there's a small typographical error. It refers to sensitive uses being in section 1791-060B, and that's incorrect. It should refer to section 1791-070D. Secondly, in the preamble, the introductory sentence of the ordinance, it states the purpose and intent, and there's a small adjustment to the wording I would suggest. The intent is not to limit and control the activity. The intent is to provide a comprehensive regulatory framework to comply with the guidelines given to us by the federal government. So to put in there a language that it's to regulate, not to limit and control, because the purpose is to license an activity, not to limit it or constrain it. The next point that I would to echo the comment of the previous speaker, that it will be a prerequisite in this ordinance as it's drafted to have a state license. But that's not possible. That creates a catch-22. The state license is not available until you have the local license. So to quickly identify where that can be remedied, that appears in all of the operational requirements sections of each of the 4 code sections. It's in Part B. Item number B says you have to have the state license first. That should simply be crossed out or put state license when it's available, because it's not expressly clear, and the license is not available yet at the state level. So it would be a moot activity to have try to get a county license and have to have a state license is not available. The final point that I would make is to simply echo what the planning director has stated, is that the conditional use permit process is too onerous of a proceeding to go through for the outdoor cultivation. And quite the most basic reason is manpower and resources to accomplish all of the reviews and to get it going and underway. It's creating just a full staffing bureaucracy to try and go through and process all of that. I think that's the most practical reason, in addition to the other points that were made. I would urge the board to adopt the urgency ordinance while we have an opportunity to view it as an urgency. It's been properly prepared, and I thank you for your time in considering all this late in the day.
Greetings, members of the board. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. I just have one simple issue. I'm very excited about the ordinance that we've seen so far. I think it's an excellent beginning, but I spoke on the 22nd about priority, and I'd like to talk about that briefly. Again, I hope that you support not only a taxed and regulated marijuana industry in Calaveras, but an industry that belongs to Calaveras. And I think that establishing priority for these people is a key part of that, to ensure that the people of this county will be able to get their licenses. I would request and hope that you would direct County Council to try to find a way to retroactively approve of these people's lawful collectives without whittling away at your permissive zoning, which I understand you don't want to do. But if a way can be found to accomplish that, I hope that you would do so, because I think it would go a long way towards seeing to it that this industry remains in the hands of the people that have been working so hard to do this properly and to be taxed and regulated properly. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, board, or almost good evening. Bill McManus, the Calaveras Project. Since it started raining ordinances Friday night late, we've had very little chance to get through all of it and try to figure out the ins and outs. I spent most of the weekend doing it, and there's some troubling contradictions or misstatements or linkages the way the ordinance is written, and if I could just highlight them very quickly. Since we're doing dispensary and cultivation, of course we've got in 1793-180, there is a possibility that for dispensary licenses and other things, that there could actually be 1 acre grows of marijuana in rural residential areas. Now further on in the code it talks about there only being 25% of a parcel can be cultivated. That's 11,000 square feet of marijuana on 1 acre. And that could be included, it's not disallowed, it needs a CUP, in rural residential. And that seems to be totally inappropriate. The overreach here is kind of amazing, and I don't know if it was on purpose or a mistake. In other areas on 93-210, number E, or letter E, the area of cannabis cultivation shall be located as shown on the application site plan, set back 30 feet. Now, I thought before we were talking about the stench of marijuana and how to protect neighbors from the smell. And now we're talking about a 30-foot setback. Well, that's not going to protect anyone from the public nuisance of the smell. Of course, they have the sensitive use and all that. As we move on, boy, awful lot to get to here. In 1793-80, license types and locational requirements, we see an expansion of, let's see, this would be, other than dispensaries, we start moving into C2. I don't know what they're going to do about distributing and transportation, manufacturing. There's nothing in there about explosion or explosive controls. In H, there's no site security described. Whoa, geez. Okay, we get to the dispensaries. What is particularly troubling is now there's an expansion or a potential expansion of marijuana dispensaries in C2, or C1, C2, as well as M4 and the CP, which means that C1 and C2 is just commercial property. And given the circumstances, if you have grows, you can put a dispensary almost anywhere. The proliferation of dispensaries in this county would be limitless if you allow C1 and C2. CP was put in Ordinance 2830 for the express reason of trying to control the number of dispensaries in Calaveras County so that it wasn't in every strip mall and on every street corner. And this ordinance violates the spirit of 2830 when it comes to the dispensary. So I know I'm out of time. Boy, it's tough to work 3 days and get 3 minutes, but I urge the board to vote no on this ordinance. Let it settle, bring it back, take a better look at it when you have more time. There's too much wrong with it. It sets too many precedents, and I think it's set up for abuse, and now we hear the very industry that was once begging to pay money is squawking over how onerous the CUP is, when that is used to protect the citizens. It's used to protect the land. It's used to protect our neighborhoods. And now they don't want to do it.
Thank you,
So
Bill.
please say no. Thank you.
Vicki Renke, Angels Camp, Calaveras County residents. I have to say that I was really disappointed to see that the Calaveras County regulations are just following right along with the new Medical Marijuana Regulations and Safety Act, which is a pretty extensive regulatory system that who knows if it'll ever become possible to even implement. And this new legislation takes the original intent of the Prop 215 passed in 1996 and the SB 420 that made legal the use of medical marijuana for chronically ill patients. That's what we voted for. It also allowed for very small personal growths and small nonprofit co-ops to grow for patients. I think everybody agreed with that. Now this new law is now legalizing commercial grows with some very complicated rules and regulations that may be impossible to implement. The new law comes with a caveat, and that is every city and county has the right to write their own regulations and rules to meet their city and county needs. And we can be more restrictive than the state law that was written. It is my educated guess that the caveat is how the legislation was able to pass all the houses out of the state, because they did add that caveat into the bill so that people who saw the problems coming with all this could say, well, the counties can take care of themselves. They'll come up with their own ordinance. And so we agree that this is an okay bill. And it's a small minority of people who live in Calaveras County that have chronic illness and are in need of medical marijuana. Yet you want to approve an activity that can affect the entire community. The entire community will pay for the increase in policing, the increase in code enforcement that will be needed to monitor the commercial grows, manufacturing, testing, distribution, transportation, and dispensary that will be added in our county under these regulations. What about the rest of the community that does not use marijuana or who want their children not to use marijuana? What about them? What message does this send to our youth that see commercial grows and dispensaries all over our county? Sadly, marijuana is still illegal in the state of California, and it's definitely illegal in the United States. You have to remember that. It has not been legalized for recreational use. And so I have a request, and I will request that each supervisor today explain to the public your rationale for approving these recommended ordinances that would allow commercial grows, manufacturing, testing labs, distribution, transportation, and dispensing of medical marijuana in Calaveras County. I think that you owe that to the public. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Barbara Zelmer. I'm a lowly person here. I'm a sixth-generation native Motherlodian, and I know for a fact in the Bible it says, "Let the weak eateth herb, and those that do not to judge those that do." But as a person with only one kidney, I am not able to take the oxycodone or the codeine or the other medicine because my kidney cannot digest it. I can drink the tea, and I did work very hardly 18 years ago to get it put on the ballot, and I'm grateful that I've been able to use this medicine. I would not be alive now to be with my children still if I had not helped with this and got it passed. And I, as a little lowly person, I don't have a problem putting a few seeds in my garden and harvesting. I'm not a commercial grower, and I feel for everyone who has to deal with the rules and regulations. But it was the Compassionate Use Act, and it was meant to make it easy for people to have it. So someone like me who wants to grow my own seeds, plant my own, sometimes I might need help with it as I get older. And in that situation, someone who, say, has cancer, they have 3 months to live. They don't have all that year to grow their crop. They have to go to dispensary. I've gone to a dispensary myself. So I see the need for it, and I see the need to regulate it, but I don't see the need to over-regulate it, because if you say you want to have one on every strip mall, if the market's not there, it won't bear it. So there's no fear of over-inundating our county with too much marijuana. When the federal government went to test it for the use of cancer treatment, the reason why they couldn't, stated in the law books, there was a shortage of it, and that's why they couldn't test it. Now, I see with, like, my land, I had 37 acres when I first bought the land. It was zoned forestry and classified. Then it changed to vineyards, and I thought, I'm never going to cut these old heritage oaks and big sugar pines bigger than you could hug. And now that the fires come through and I have 100% mortality on my 37 acres, I wouldn't mind maybe hiring the homeless in migrant cabins to grow marijuana. I mean, look at this, too. Thank you. No applause, I don't want to cause any trouble. I'm a lowly little person, I don't want any trouble. But it was the Compassionate Use Act, and hopefully we can all work together as a community to monitor and keep everyone safe and still provide for those who need. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Edwin Broyo. I'm from Angels Camp. I'd like to touch on a few things that the last speakers just talked about with security and everything else, and talking about theft. And the thing is if you live in your neighborhood, you should know your neighbor. It shouldn't be that you have to have an address stating what you are. The people that you live around, your surroundings, they know who you are. I could give you the name of every next door neighbor who lives next to me. And about the commercial use of it. When we first started growing as a Prop 215, and it was for personal consumption, that was about it. And now with this commercial issue that's come up, this is what we're doing this for, is for the people who can't provide this kind of service for themselves. People who are sick, people who can't go out, can't maintain their garden, don't have the funds to go out and plant, don't have the funds to do an indoor grow system, don't have the funds to do these kinds of things, but need their medication. And then I wanted to touch on the zoning a little bit. From what I'm reading here, for an indoor grow, you're talking about doing commercial on certain square feet. How much commercial residency do you guys see around here? There's not much. And so when you talk about something that's over 5,000 square feet, the person who has 200 acres has no problem to be able to maintain something like that in a residential area and not have any kind of consequence from it, because they have the property there. It's not a nuisance to their next door neighbor. And a lot of property is like that. There's a lot of 20, 40 acre parcels around here. And it's the same with a lot of that. I feel that if you guys are going to break things into commercial, there should be a little bit more insight on that, let alone just saying that if you have 5,000 square feet that it's a commercial grow. The other thing is that you guys are talking about that you want this away from the public eye. Well, by putting a grow in a commercial area, what are you doing? You're throwing it on the strip. This is what it is. Here it is. The other thing I was looking at is a few of the stipulations for an indoor grow, an 8-foot fence, gate, and lock system. Well, if you're growing inside your house or inside of a warehouse or a shop, what do you need an 8-foot fence around to secure something that's already in a secure area? Those are the few topics that I wanted to touch. Thank you very much for your time.
Hello, my name is Jim Vattuoni. I just want to remind everybody of one key thing. The work of all the people here really does not dictate how you choose to educate and inform against or for medical cannabis. So the folks that are actually having large issues or the folks that are for this 100% both have to consider how they educate the youth and people growing into this industry. It's an important thing that we've kind of forgot, but it is important because we don't want people misusing something that they think they're getting a benefit or misusing something that they shouldn't be using. So I just want to bring that to everybody. Thank you.
Okay.
Just one quick thing, Marty Crane. I was going to ask about the indoor patient grows, why you'd need an 8-foot fence, and how that would work if you were in an apartment or a duplex or something. Just a question. And then outdoor lighting, we haven't mentioned it in these conversations, but in our planning and over the years, we're very concerned about a lot of the reason why people come to Calaveras County in the foothills is for the dark skies, and I'm wondering how we're addressing the outdoor lighting to protect our dark skies. Thank you.
Hi, Tom Liberty. Like everybody already said, or a lot of folks always said, amazing what's happened so quickly with this, and I thank everybody that's been working on it. I wanted to respond just for a second about some of the concerns I've heard, because it reminded me that I wanted to remind you that I really believe that this is really an economic issue. I grow cannabis. I've been growing cannabis for about 6 years. Despite the way I look, I don't use cannabis. It doesn't mean that I don't approve of cannabis. To me, that's up to somebody else whether they want to use it or not. But approving and establishing a sound economic policy for a county that kind of looks like it's about to go under. I mean, I would have advocated it for before the fire anyway, but I don't think you can knock the legs out from under this industry and have the fire happen at the same time and not have it be just total devastation. I guess what I'm trying to say is, this isn't about personally approving of cannabis use. I'm not even sure that even really enters in. I mean, it certainly doesn't really enter into the equation for me. It's about what's best for the county, and it's about what's best for the county as a whole, and what's best for the people that are here, trying to keep people here, trying to stay vital, trying to keep Calaveras County, and still be able to call it home. So, just for each, everybody that's got to vote on this personally, to me, voting on this you're not telling people, oh, go smoke a joint. You're just making a decision about what's best for the county.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Kowchuk. I live in 43 Dogtown Road in Angels Camp. Been there for 30 years. And I'm not here to talk about guidelines. Don't know much about them. I'm just here to support this industry. And I've been affiliated with them off and on for about a year now. And I'm just here to say that I've found them to be very conscientious, caring. They're careful. They're involved in our community. I see them involved with their kids at school. They contribute. And so I support them. And on a second note, there's always a debate of whether this is a medicine or not. And I come from a family that has a long lineage of cancer. And I can go back as far as 79 and tell you that as a medicine it works, or at least it helps. had a grandfather fighting lung cancer, and halfway through his treatment, he was ready to give up. And a friend of ours told us, this stuff works, you got to give it a try. And he was a Puritan, he didn't drink. And convincing him that smoking pot was going to fix anything was a hard one. But he was dying, so we were able to convince him to give it a try. And I don't know the science behind this. All that I know is it worked. He was able to start to keep his food down, and he got through the rest of his treatments and lived another 5 years. So that's all I got to say today. Thank you.
Ronaldo Brolio, Angels Camp area. I'm here to basically ask the council to make sure that they give this due deliberation and the extent. I think there's a lot of factors involved in this. As an electrician, licensed contractor for over 40 years here in the county, I wire a lot of indoor grow type of things, okay? I do see a lot of outdoor grows as well. There's a basic large economic value to this as part of this county, and I think it does help support this county to a great deal. I think there's got to be some measures. I run cattle on the side. As to the construction business as well, and in leasing ground, 10, 15 years ago when it wasn't really basically legal and it was looked on in a different light, we had people running all over what the grounds that I lease and et cetera that were running tubes off of the hill, carving out of the manzanita pile and putting their grow in. We have a lot of really good tax-paying citizens here for numerous reasons, medical, give it whatever you want, but they're basically all good people, and I think that we need to help the commerce of this county. I think we need to take care of these people that are here for whatever their reasons are. I don't think any of them are here to ask for anything that is just blanket statement wide open. I think they all would appreciate some regulations to it so that we don't end up with a black market type of thing where there is nothing written down or done. So that's my feeling on where they're at as well. Thank you.
Bonnie Newman from Double Springs. My concern is very basic. Medicine for the people that need it, the patients. I cared for a gentleman that had epileptic seizures and used medical marijuana, not as smoking, but as in a pill form to help control his seizures. He then suffered from brain cancer and had to undergo chemotherapy and radiation. The medicine helped in his sleeping patterns as well as the nausea, and it allowed him to continue to have a healthy appetite. And I'm looking at the first part, and it says personal cultivation. It says for self only and only at patient's own residence. And the lady spoke before about the people that live in small apartments. How are they going to be able to maintain a grow when they have no property? The other thing is about when we talked about the caregiver cultivation, I'm asked, and I don't have the 100-page document, that must allow for inspection of records like commercial uses. If that's outlined, what the inspection would be and what the records need to be maintained. And once again, I'm concerned about providing the medicine for the people that suffer from various ailments. And that's my concern. Thank you.
Jed Richardson, Mountain Ranch. I'm a realtor in Mountain Ranch, and I wanted to address the section 17.93210L, which states that a lawful permanent dwelling must exist on either the parcel containing the cultivation site or a contiguous parcel. I'd just like to point out that there's many dwellings that are lived in as residences and taxed as such that for whatever reason are unpermitted at this point within the county. Perhaps they're older residences, there's no building department prior to a certain date. But I'd like to have a liberal interpretation of lawful dwelling in this case. Another section that concerns me slightly and maybe is addressed is that section 17.93320, nuisance and violations, page 185. It is unlawful and a violation of this chapter for a person to permit a public nuisance to exist upon a real property. I just want it understood that by following all these regulations with the setbacks and standard agricultural practices, that the issue of smell is adequately addressed, odors are adequately addressed, and they're protected by right to farm. So, thank you.
Hello again, Dustin Peterson. I would also like to commend the board on their actions taken so far. It has been a lot of work, and it's amazing that you came up with something in this amount of time that we can work with. I'm a second-generation cannabis farmer. I have a family of 5, and I wanted to address the permanent dwelling issue and also the issue in section 17.93.240, paragraph M. I'll start first with the residency or the dwelling requirement. Although the permanent dwelling requirement seems a logical step in the right direction, it might have some serious negative effects on our immediate recovery effort as a community. It has been said many times, but I'll say it again, many farmers, including myself, were burned out by the fire. It seems unreasonable to expect all of them to have a house built in time for planting season or even by next year. The cleanup crews won't be done for some time, and the road devastation's only going to slow things down for people to try to rebuild. I can tell you with great certainty that I will be nowhere near having a finished dwelling by this spring, and it would be nothing short of a miracle that I would have one finished by next. We should not risk driving farmers out with such a costly requirement at this time. Governor Jerry Brown signed an executive order to allow people to reside in temporary housing for a period of at least 3 years in order to recover and hopefully rebuild. I respectfully ask the board today to show their compassion for farmers like myself by not including the residency requirement in our local ordinance for 3 years as well. I meant to say dwelling requirement. The section 17.93.240M states that minors shall not be allowed on any portion of the premises where marijuana is located. Again, I'm second generation, and as often the case in agriculture, the skills are passed down through generations. Traditionally, farming is a family practice. Our farm, we try to be as sustainable as possible. We have chickens, goats, rabbits, cats, dogs. They all do their part on the farm. Most important aspect of this model is my family. We all do our part as well. The young children fetch the eggs, feed the goats, while the other children, the older children, help learn to farm themselves.
30 seconds.
There are many new, and also, that's kind of the old school version, but there are many new and emerging cultivation techniques that are similar for indoor farming as well. Hydroculture systems that incorporate fish, warm beds, shrimp, as well as the diversity of plant species. All of these could safely involve family members as long as there is adult supervision around the actual cannabis. What I'm asking now is not that we allow children to be allowed to run unsupervised around cannabis, but to simply allow us to continue family farming practices. Minors, I'd like to change it from minors shall not be allowed on any portion of the premises where marijuana is located to no unaccompanied minors shall be allowed on any portion of the premises where marijuana is located. Thank you.
Hello, my name's John. I'm from Valley Springs. I'm a new resident to this county, or relatively.
I haven't been a lifetimer here. I moved here a couple of years ago with exactly this day in mind. I came here to be a cultivator, and I've got a few comments on this. I want to thank you guys because, unlike a lot of other boards in the state, you haven't had a knee-jerk reaction of banning outright immediately, so thank you for your consideration. I'd like to second the people who've been talking about zone clearance for cultivation types. I think the conditional use is just too restrictive. I do have a problem with the zone clearance for personal cultivation. I'd like to see that some amendment on that because personal people have a right under Prop 215 to grow. And I don't want to see any unreasonable restrictions placed on them. I think reasonable restrictions are fine. Another issue is the permitting. As far as I know, maybe the council can correct, but I believe the state law says the local permits have to be acquired first. So if that's the case, then how do we get our permits? Like someone said, it's a catch-22. The other thing, I was very curious, I can't understand why a nursery is only allowed in these zones that you've allowed them in instead of on the same zones that commercial cultivation are allowed. I don't understand the reasoning behind that. Since in cultivation you do almost all of the same things you do in a nursery, just on a more limited scale. That's all about all the comments I have. Just to answer the one person's question, you talked about extracting and explosions. I've been researching this a lot. The state rules will very much require that any building that's doing extraction has appropriate safety measures in place. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Larry Bridges, and even though you request we not do so, myself personally, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for your work and your efforts on this issue. There are a few things that I just want to point out. I mean, I think you came up with a great draft. I think there's some areas that need to be addressed, to be looked at a little harder. But the facts are that you're in the right direction. You know, it's amazing what's happened with this whole concept of medical marijuana. We'll start with that. You know, I can remember back when I was a teenager, there's a whole lot of people probably still in federal penitentiaries today for as little as an ounce. I can remember I had a brother-in-law who went to prison for an ounce of marijuana. He was 18 years old. And things have changed. There are those that oppose it. They had opposed it originally when the medical marijuana laws were imposed. They were in here arguing, and these are the same types of people that are still showing, oh no, they don't need it, there's no medical research and so forth to support it. We're way past that. We're there. I'm not going to even address that issue. There's a couple of things I do want to point out because I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, and that's people talking about the security aspects and the crime factor. And I'd like to just quickly go over a couple of statistics. First off, I will say I think I would ask you to take another look at this 8-foot fencing. I mean, I'm assuming the intent is for security reasons, but I'd ask you to look at that. And what I'm going to do is just quote a few issues here. First off, let's talk about robberies. Robbery is a theft of a person by use of force or fear. The necessary elements of the crime are specific intent, theft from a person, and by the use of force or fear. Banks, people normally think of robbery originally as banks. Well, 2.1% of the robberies are to banks. Retail gas stations, 8.3%. Most robberies occur on our streets today at 44.5%. Home invasions, 14.3%. 2006 FBI Uniform Crime Report indicates that there were 447,403 robberies. That's one robbery per minute in the United States. The highest states that were affected by that were the Western United States at 38.3%. The weapon of choice was a firearm, 42.2%, knives, 8.6%. According to NBC News, the Denver Police Department have indicated that, and let's address it, In 2009, there were 17% of the marijuana dispensary stores were robbed or burglarized, which is slightly less than liquor stores, which are at 20%, or pharmacies and banks, which are 34%.
Okay, so
I'm
your
sorry,
ti-
Cliff.
I'm sorry, your time's up.
My time's up already? No warning? Okay,
Oh, yeah,
thank you.
they actually warned you, probably couldn't hear.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any more public comments? Oh, I guess not.
Just clarify.
One time.
Fencing.
One time, please.
I'll talk to you about fencing then.
Okay, all right, let's bring back to the board. So we have board comments. Anybody want to start?
Well, first I want to congratulate and thank County Council. On December 22nd, we asked them to come back with a very challenging project, and they did that. That's been 35 days. There were 3 major holidays, and that doesn't include Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, but they still managed to get this back to us. That being said, there were some things said by presenters that really strike home with me. One asked for an explanation as to why we would vote yes on this, and I think that's a fair request. And the other, somebody brought up that we should have due deliberation of this. Last Wednesday, I fired up my little iPad, and it wasn't loaded yet. Thursday, it wasn't loaded yet. And Friday by noon, it wasn't loaded yet. I've only had this since Friday evening. Saturday, I was booked up already. Sunday, I started to look at it, and Monday, I was looking at it with a lot more, not concern, but a lot closer. I would like to ask this to come back a week from today in an urgent meeting. Because I honestly, I don't know how anybody could have studied this completely. It is, this was a 400-page agenda, and a quarter of that was the marijuana ordinances that were studied. I'm not asking that the urgency ordinance be dropped. And the meeting a week from today on Tuesday would be an urgent meeting.
I would just clarify, I'm not going to be here the next 2 weeks. So if the board wants to have additional time to discuss this, what I would propose is that we get additional direction on some of the issues that may have been brought up today, maybe what different direction that the board would like to give us based on staff recommendation, Mr. Maurer's recommendations, and have us agendize it for the end of February for consideration. At that point, that would allow you additional time, and we would work on any changes that you gave us, any direction you gave us today, and get that draft out as soon as possible. Again, the other thing is that if AB 21 is passed in the next 10 days or up until the end of February, once the March deadline is lifted, if it is, we don't have to worry about an urgency ordinance, and we would go through the normal process of taking it to the Planning Commission first rather than bringing it back to the board.
Well, from what I could read, I'm pretty sure the urgency ordinance or the March 1st deadline is going to be lifted. But even if it wasn't, the state is no more prepared to deal with this on March 1st than any other organization. They would have a hard time. If we were to make a good faith effort towards doing something, I don't believe that they would.
My only hesitation is that the March 1 deadline, if it's lifted, that would remove the urgency for having it be an urgency ordinance.
Well, that's why I'm asking for next Tuesday.
Well, I don't see, why don't we give it more time than next Tuesday? I mean, if we're going to extend.
Well, I mean, I want to be able to read all this and compare it to AB2, that has already come before us. When we had our December 22nd meeting, I spent a week and a half studying the legislation that had been passed. This just was not enough time to decide on something that literally is going to change the landscape of
When are you going to come
Calaveras.
back?
I will be back the week,
2 weeks after?
yes, let me see, I can give you the exact date. And just so the board knows, my office is incredibly impacted right now with the asphalt plant coming to the board on the 9th. So just so you know, this is something that, that we, because I'm not going to be here the 1st through the 12th, I'll be back on, and then the 15th is a county holiday, all county offices are closed, I believe, on the 15th. So I would be returning on the 16th.
All right, so, I mean, but at the very least, if we had this again, and we had more time than just a few hours, we could probably list what we think maybe our suggestions are, you jot them down, and then come back, when you come back, to go through all of that and do something like that. That way we aren't stalling or stopping, we're just continuing, because last night, I think it was at 7 or 8 o'clock, Julie was still shooting stuff to us.
And again, I guess what I would hope for is if we come back at the end of February, in order for it to be an urgency ordinance, there has to be an urgent reason, such as a deadline that we're up against. And if March 1 is no longer...
Let's make March 1 the deadline. You're going to be back 2 weeks before the end of March 1.
We can't impose a deadline on ourselves. This would be a state mandated deadline. So if AB 21 is passed and that state mandated deadline is lifted, then the urgency is no longer on us. So then we would take whatever direction you give us either today, or we could do another study session at the end of February, regardless, get it its additional direction, and then take it through the Planning Commission rather than having it adopted as an urgency ordinance.
Are there legal conditions that you have to make findings for to make it an urgency ordinance? And
Yes.
could you just say, well, it's, this is, it's getting on the growing season, so there's going to be already people out there doing this type of activity, so we want to make sure that we're, we know what's going to be in place. The urgency, that certainly seems pretty urgent to me.
Just to address some of the legal requirements for an urgency ordinance, it generally has to be health and safety based. If you look at the staff report and you look at the findings that supported the urgency ordinance in the draft before you, you'll see the type of factors that would give rise to an urgency. And here it's a combination of health and safety concerns about unregulated marijuana commercial activities combined with that March 1st deadline. And I do agree with Ms. Stedfeld that if I definitely second her recommendation that we have about 10 days, at which point the governor will determine whether or not he's going to sign AB 21. If that happens, there's no need to rush it through as an urgency ordinance. We could have it as a regular ordinance. We could have study sessions. We would have time to get more input from the board and the planning commission as well. And from the public as well. And so if we came back on the 26th with perhaps a study session right before the board meeting to get additional board input, we would still, in the off chance that March 1st deadline is not lifted, we would still be able to have some skeleton ordinance. It doesn't have to even itself be permanent. Go through on that last board meeting before March 1st.
At this point, if a vote were to be called now, I would vote no. For the last 5 to 6 days, I've had numerous contacts from my constituents in my districts. And those are involving actions by property owners that are evicting long-time businesses to set up some type of indoor grow or outdoor grow in anticipation of this ordinance. We have to take the time to research this properly.
I have to say I heard that too, and I did not hear it from Supervisor Oliveira.
So if that's the case, then if there's additional direction the board would like to give us to modify what's been presented today, we can, hear that, bring it back on February 23rd. That would allow you some additional time between now and February 23rd to digest this, and we can do some of the cleanup issues that the public brought up, as well as any direction that the board gives us today, and present that to you on the 23rd. And by then, we will know whether it has to be, whether it would just be really a study session to get direction from the board and then take it to the planning commission versus bringing it forward as an urgency ordinance, because by then we would know if AB 21.
So you're saying that we have to go through everything in here and give you direction on modifications?
I guess what I would be looking for is there anything based on the things that you heard today from the public, what you've heard from Director Mauer, that you would want to change from the direction you gave us on December 22nd, excuse me.
Well, I certainly have questions.
Yeah, I have questions.
You want to be here till
comments.
midnight? Yes. Because I'll tell you right now, if I go through all of this and give you my modifications, you'll be here till midnight.
And I just wanted to remind Chair Edson, it's
I
5
understand
o'clock
that.
and you wanted to be out of here by 4:30.
I have a variety of issues that need to be thoroughly investigated that I am not in agreement with. And to be quite fair to Mr. Mauer, he's done an excellent job. You folks have done a wonderful job. But the zoning issue regarding dispensaries is not acceptable in my position. You cannot change those zoning requirements that we've already looked at. That's just one of many issues that I have.
Well, there has to be some kind of protection for existing businesses, because I've heard what Supervisor Oliveira brought up too, and honestly, it's disturbing, where existing businesses feel they're under threat right now to be evicted to make room for indoor grows, because the profitability of it is much greater than what their current tenants will get. And I don't know if there's a way to protect that. And then the other thing that I've heard too, residential property is being snapped up next to other residential property to become grows. And I don't have the answer or the direction for that at this moment. I want to be able to go through these very carefully. I was impressed to listen to our planning commission, how they go through things word for word. I did not do that with this. And that the importance of this bothers me. I didn't have the time to do that.
Okay, I will talk.
So,
So again,
You're the lawyer.
I am not going to be here for the next 2 weeks. We have, like I said, the asphalt plant before the board on February 9th. We can bring this back if you want to hold a special meeting just for this item. But between the regular board hearings, which are February 9th and February 23rd, that would be the week of the 15th. Certainly, we can bring this item back for further discussion. I suspect we will know by then about AB 21. You've heard a lot of public testimony today. You've heard some recommended changes from Director Mauer. If you don't want to give further direction at all, then we can not modify this in any way, shape, or form until we come back at either a special meeting or on February 23rd for additional...
I have a question for you. How long have you guys been doing this here? For a month or so, right?
Medical marijuana?
No, this ordinance, right here.
This ordinance right here was drafted pursuant to the direction we got on December 22nd.
December 22nd, okay. All right, so I've had since Friday to go through it. And last night I was receiving emails last night for, cheat sheet, so I wouldn't have to go through it all.
Okay, so then why don't we come back on February 23rd for additional direction?
Well, that's what I was going to say. If no one wants to come back on the 16th, let's do the 23rd. Will give us a chance to deliberate what you have done.
So during that period of time, maybe we can go through it and filter concerns, and maybe, can we do that?
Certainly, each board member can talk to us. The board as a whole can't.
I know we can't as a whole, but we can send
discuss
stuff to you guys, right?
If you have concerns, you can make them aware make us aware of those things, yes.
We can count to 3.
Are you sure? That's how
So,
many emails you sent me last night, 3.
so is this the 23rd that we'll be back, or did you want to do a special meeting the week of the 15th?
No, that's the 23rd.
Hold the board.
I would like to come back in a special day and time just for this issue, because our agenda is packed for February. And you can see right now, these folks have been waiting all day. So I would suggest a special meeting on the 16th. Meanwhile, you know, I had an opportunity to review a lot of these things, and it was asked earlier about, you know, how I would vote or what my direction is going in. We looked at this back in April as a board and weren't able to make a decision then because there were so many things that are out there. It was very fluid at the time. And so because we didn't make a decision in April, things progressed until we were hearing about the state laws that were going into effect in, I forget when it was, October, November. And, you know, got a lot of heat for not taking activity back in March, April of last year, because of the growing season and what it means to our community, et cetera. So in December, we had a good meeting with giving input and direction to staff, and I commend staff for coming together with these ordinances and seeking, you know, advice from other counties and so on and so forth to come together where we are today. I believe that the longer we wait on this, we're going to find ourselves a year, like we did last year in April, with the growing season upon us. And, you know, again, we're not going to have really clear direction for our staff, our sheriff's department, our community, growers, et cetera, to move ahead one way or the other. So I would say that we need to meet sooner rather than later, and I would encourage, you know, lots of discussion and questions that we have to put it out there so that we can have a better meeting on the 16th of February. We've heard some comments today, some comments to give a little bit more food for thought. We don't want to be quick about this, but I believe that there is some good information today for consideration to go into this ordinance. I'm looking for a regulation to regulate this. This industry is here, it has been for quite some time, and it's been unregulated, and now we have a chance to regulate it on a local level. I'm looking for the opportunity to generate a positive environment, both physically and environmentally, and to make it safe for our community. So I too, you know, Peter, you made the recommendation from a CUP to AUP. I tend to agree with that process. I think it'll just bog down and you know, we'll have, I don't think you can ever process as many as the applications as we think that may be out there. And, you know, there's some language fine-tuning that I see that in regards to the personal and caregiver cultivation. I too question the fencing in some areas. I question whether or not a caregiver personal grower needs that background check. So, you know, those are things that I'd like to be able to discuss more on the 16th to give staff direction. And again, we may hear it again the following Tuesday. But if we're able to meet on that day and just hear this particular issue, I think that might help all the way around.
So what I understand is a special meeting on the 16th, and the subject to be agendized for the 23rd also? Is that what we're talking about?
At this point, it sounds like Supervisor Ponte is wanting to have a special meeting on the 16th to further give direction, and then we can certainly meet back on the 23rd. The 23rd is a regular board meeting. So what I'm hearing from Supervisor Ponte is she would like an additional special meeting specifically for this, for a dedicated date for this item.
I agree with that, and I said that earlier, and I still agree with that. Actually, I was looking up even earlier than that, but I'd like to see that we have a meeting dedicated to it, and one way or the other, we wrap this up.
I mean, I'm okay for next Tuesday as well.
She can't do it.
I know.
Problem.
So, just to...
I'm good with the 23rd as a regular meeting to discuss it.
Fine with that. I do have a question, though. So, what you're telling me, even though I think that we could find reasons for it to be urgent, but you're the lawyer, so I'll go with what you tell me. If the governor signs this bill to eliminate the March 1st deadline, we cannot, as a board, pass an urgency ordinance. Therefore, no matter what we do, it's going to go back to planning commission, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That's where we would like direction. Then, keep in mind, an urgency ordinance is just that. It's an urgency ordinance that's intended to be more temporary in nature. It's not a permanent ordinance. So even if this board were to adopt this today as an urgency ordinance, we would still have to take a permanent ordinance through the regular chain of the planning commission and then to the board for a permanent ordinance.
Right, and so what seems like is going to happen if things work in Sacramento, who knows about Sacramento though, but it looks like they're going to pass that before we come back on the 16th, or by the 16th. So, I mean, maybe we want to wait till the 23rd, just so we have that extra time to know what's happening at the state level.
I would agree with Supervisor Wright. CAO Ryan, can you define the requirements of a special meeting? I mean, is it called it, under what circumstances?
The board can choose to, I mean, just like when the board decided to go and have meetings every week for the Butte Fire update, that's a choice of the board. When we talk about an emergency meeting, we're talking about a 24-hour notice meeting, or...
A special meeting requires 24-hour notice under the Brown Act, where a regular meeting, all the notice would be 72 hours in advance.
Oh, so a special meeting requires 72 hours.
Special meeting is 24, regular 72.
Okay.
Special meeting is basically outside of the regular
Meeting
board
schedule.
meetings.
So we
The
could- we
regular
could
meeting
decide to hold-
schedule is the second and the fourth Tuesday of every month.
We can decide to hold a special meeting right now,
Right.
and then come back on a regular meeting with the results of that, right?
I'm
On the
sorry, I
23rd.
did not hear that.
We could decide to hold a special meeting right now on the 16th, and then come back on the 23rd for a regular meeting, and let her rip.
Certainly. Let her rip. Okay.
We can
That's
also
something that we
approve
could
something
do.
on the
One of the-
16th.
It's an actionable item.
Right, but we're
On the
going to
16th.
most likely be at a different place when we're going to know, we're going to be mandated by the state. I mean, they're going to
Does
make
that
their
matter?
decision. It does matter because we can't pass an urgency measure. So, I mean, basically, then we'd be giving direction.
But
to
we
the
still
planning.
have until the deadline date, don't we? Until don't we still have until the deadline date?
That goes away.
No, but if the March deadline is lifted, if AB 21 is passed, then it's no longer.
Okay, then we're not under an
And we
emergency.
can't do an urgency ordinance on this,
Yes.
Right.
even though I want to do it.
Yes.
So in other words, if we were able to find out and get information that AB 21 passes, that removes any type of requirement to have anything done in a timely, expedited fashion. If we do receive information that AB 21 does not pass, or is going to be delayed or something, we could then call an emergency meeting with 24 hours notice, or special meeting, right? And address that issue then. Is that possible?
Special meeting is 24-hour notice. Keep in mind, February 23rd is already a regular board meeting. So that's
understand.
going to be there, and we can anticipate and plan that if AB 21 is not passed, we will kind of have an idea between now and then whether it will or not. If it doesn't look like it's going to pass, we can agendize it for the 23rd. So it's not it wouldn't be a special emergency or special meeting. We can put it on the regular board meeting on the 23rd for action, pending the further direction on the 16th at a special meeting. Yes. Yes, we could. The 16th could,
We
it's a
could
special.
what?
The 16th as a special meeting, it could be an action item, it could be a study session for direction. I suspect based on what the board has been saying now, because you have concerns with what is presented, if we don't have additional direction to change it, I suspect you're going to have some direction for staff on the 16th to modify it in some way, shape, or form.
And will it be ready by the 23rd then for action?
It can be, yeah.
I mean, realistically, I know we're in a very crisis situation in your office, and especially planning. If we do decide to modify on the 16th, would it be ready for a presentation and vote on the 23rd, regular meeting?
We will have to make that work if AB 21 does not pass, yes.
Okay. If it does not pass?
If it does not pass,
So
If it does pass, we have time.
yes.
And if we do nothing today in giving you direction, we have kind of like done nothing for 3 weeks on this.
I wouldn't say done nothing
Not
because...
really.
You mean, but between now and the 16th?
If we don't give you direction.
There would be nothing done on the ordinance between now and the 16th unless the board gives us direction to modify it in some way, shape, or form.
So we can still feed them that information
Except
between
for
now and the 16th?
clerical errors or cleanups that are clearly Scrivener's errors.
I'd like to do it now.
We could do a few.
Let's pull the board then, because
I mean, some direction to at least allow some additional research on,
Chairman, do you
Of
have a
these
prior
items.
commitment that you're late for?
we...
I know I am.
Yes. So, but that's not the reason. The reason is because I would like to go through this in a more thorough fashion.
Correct.
You know, and running through this thing like this, it's not going to be a favorable thing. And, you know, and I wanted to give this a lot of thought. I want to make sure that we do it it's a very meaningful thing for a lot of people, and I want to make sure we can give them that due diligence, so. I honestly, I mean, I went through some of it, but I didn't go through all of it, and I couldn't. There wasn't enough time. So when I get a board packet, usually if we get on Wednesday, 500 pages, I can do that pretty good. Pretty good. But this was, and this is, you got to read every darn thing in here, so.
It is certainly staff's
And you guys know the feeling.
intention or desire to get things to the board as soon as possible.
And counsel, we don't blame you for that. You were doing
you
an
did fine. It
outstanding
was
job.
76 pages. The
I
other
think you
items
guys-
on the agenda had been reviewed from us before. I'm just sorry everybody didn't have a chance to thoroughly look it over. But you guys did fine.
Woo-hoo, there's a good slam.
Okay,
So,
Well, I'm serious.
yeah, I'm glad you could find the time.
So, well, I mean, what I suggest we do is that we, I have a few things I can just tell you right now, and then, or we could discuss right now, a few items. If you guys need to leave, I mean, unless Steve has to leave too.
No, I don't need to leave.
Then
I
the
already
three of
covered
us
two things.
could, go over the few points that we have, or at least that's what I would suggest. You guys can take off, and we can talk about it.
So are we bringing it back on the 16th?
And then we're going to bring it back on the 16th.
Well, we can call for a vote right now.
On
When
what?
will we bring it back on the 16th?
16th? Or the 23rd.
23rd?
23rd is a lot better. That gives us a lot of time to digest what we're looking
I
at.
would just caution the board that if we only bring it back on the 23rd with no additional clarification, no additional direction to us, if AB 21 doesn't get passed, they would not allow any leeway but for us to make any additional
Changes.
modifications. We would be right up against the March 1 deadline.
Well,
So-
we have more than 23 days to get that information to you. That's more than 3 days.
As a board, we would be looking for direction from not individual board members.
As a board, Mike, we have to be
need
here.
direction from the board as a
I
whole.
understand.
And that's why we would be looking at having the special meeting on the 16th to get board direction on modifications, and then bring it back on the 23rd if AB 21 doesn't pass.
Sorry, no.
So I-
This was what offered.
No, no.
My,
Don't confuse
I
us.
I would like to bring it back on the 16th, and with the chance that it's still an emergency ordinance.
I would go for the 16th, and I'd like to stay and give some input for what we have now. So that gives you some time to work on something between now and the 16th.
I'm good with the 16th, and I'll feed you plenty of information between now and then.
I'm good for the 16th and the 23rd, but I want to discuss everything with the full board here.
Okay, can I I do have at least, I'm fine with that, is great, but I do have a few questions if we could go over now.
Well, I'm going to actually leave, so you're the board chair. You can just do that.
Well, yeah. So,
Thank you.
all right.
No, I'm going to stay here with you.
Okay, are you sure?
For 10 minutes. Make it good.
We don't need, you got 10 minutes?
Yeah, I got 10 minutes.
So, mainly, the thing that,
We only have 6 minutes left on the desk. If
Okay.
you can take a 5-minute break and...
okay, let's take a 5-minute break.